In the ancient valleys of the Blackfoot territory, where the mountains hold secrets as old as time, lives a solitary widow whose hands craft the most intricate medicines from the wild. Sarah Cloudwalker has spent 5 years rebuilding her life. After tragedy, creating a sanctuary of healing and wisdom. But beneath her gentle smile and soft voice lies a past written in the blood of those who threatened her people. Once known as Ghost Eyes, the most skilled tracker and hunter the Blackfoot tribe had seen in generations, she now walks a path of peace. But what happens when ruthless outsiders arrive, threatening her community and forcing her to confront the warrior she had chosen to leave behind? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Morning mist clings to the cedars as Sarah Cloudwalker moves, silently, through the dense forest surrounding Eagle Valley. At 43, she carries herself with the quiet strength of someone who knows the land as intimately as her own heartbeat. Her dark hair, streaked with silver at the temples, is plaited in a single braid that falls between her shoulder blades, swaying gently with each deliberate step she takes through the underbrush. The rising sun paints golden shafts between the ancient trees as she kneels beside a cluster of mushrooms, her fingers gently testing their firmness. Her movements are economical and precise, not a motion wasted. To a casual observer, she appears to be simply a woman gathering ingredients for medicine. To those who truly understand the land, every movement reveals the disciplined training of a master hunter. Sarah's cabin stands at the edge of the reservation, where forest meets meadow, its weathered logs and stone chimney blending harmoniously with the landscape. Smoke rises in a thin column from the hearth where she prepares her daily medicines. The cabin, with its garden of healing plants and herbs, has become a place where tribal members and even some respectful outsiders come seeking remedies for ailments, both physical and spiritual. Behind the simple wooden door, however, lies a space, organized with tactical precision. Each herb hangs in perfect alignment above a meticulously arranged workstation. Dried plants are labeled and stored in handmade pottery jars, positioned for optimal access. Baskets of roots and berries are stacked in what appears to be decorative patterns, but actually allows instant identification of their contents. What visitors don't see, what no one in Eagle Valley sees, is how each window offers clear sightlines to all approaches, how the heavy oak table could serve as a defensive barrier, how the handcrafted walking sticks displayed on the wall are perfectly balanced weapons in disguise, how the seemingly decorative beadwork actually marks measured distances from the cabin to the tree line. "Morning, Ms. Cloudwalker," calls Michael Waters, the 19-year-old grandson of Elder John Waters, as he approaches along the worn path, a basket covered with cloth in his hands. "Brought the sweetgrass you asked for from the southeastern meadow." "Thank you, Michael," Sarah responds, her voice carrying a gentle melody that 5 years in this remote community has shaped into something both soothing and authoritative. "Please, set it near the drying rack." Her eyes track his movement automatically, while her hands continue preparing a poultice of yarrow and pine resin, a survival habit from years when looking away meant losing track of prey, or becoming prey yourself. What Michael doesn't notice is how Sarah has positioned herself to maintain clear sightlines to both doors, how her right hand stays within reach of the heavy stone pestle that could become a weapon in an instant, how her moccasin-clad feet remain in a balanced stance that would allow immediate movement in any direction. "Elder Waters says there's a tribal council meeting tonight," Michael mentions as he sets down the sweetgrass. "Says it's important you come. Something about strangers asking questions about reservation boundaries." Sarah merely nods, her focus seemingly on the medicine before her, through her mind instantly categorizing this information alongside other subtle changes she's noticed recently. Three unfamiliar vehicles with out-of-state plates circling the reservation perimeter. Conversations at the trading post about mineral rights. Questions about who owns which hunting grounds. "I'll be there," she replies, her voice carrying that unique quality that somehow makes people lean closer to hear her. It's a technique she learned long ago. Speak softly, and people pay more attention, reveal more than they intend. Through a window, Sarah watches Elder Waters making his morning walk along the community paths, his dignified gait carrying the weight of tribal leadership with grace. Her eyes automatically scan for movement in the tree line, calculating distances, identifying potential cover. Habits she maintains despite 5 years of relative peace in this community. The small bell hanging by her door rings softly as Amanda, Little Feather, who runs the reservation's cultural center, enters with her usual warm smile. "Sarah, your medicine bundles were a hit with the visitors yesterday. That family from Minneapolis bought every single one and asked if they could order more for their wellness store," she says, setting an empty basket on the counter. "Can I get another dozen for this weekend? We have a university group coming to learn about traditional healing practices." "Of course," Sarah answers, already moving to gather the materials for Amanda's order, her body shifting with an economy of motion that speaks of disciplined training rather than mere efficiency. "The bundles carry prayers for protection and healing," she explains, the story flowing easily after 5 years of crafting her place within the community. The truth that these particular arrangements of herbs and minerals were once used by Blackfoot warriors to mask their scent from both animal and human prey remains unspoken. "Have you met those men asking about the old mining claims?" Amanda asks, leaning against the doorframe, her expression concerned. 3 white men in expensive outdoor gear, driving a black SUV. They've been taking photographs along the northern boundary near the sacred springs. "I haven't had the pleasure," Sarah replies, though she's tracked their movements through the forest for the past 4 days, noting their unusual interest in the reservation's water sources, the way they mark GPS coordinates while thinking themselves unobserved. "Well, they've been asking all kinds of questions about tribal jurisdiction, mineral rights, and who controls access to the Northern Canyon," Amanda continues, unaware that Sarah is mentally mapping the strangers' movements against known valuable resources. "Elder Waters doesn't trust them, says they're too interested in our emergency response protocols for people claiming to be just recreational hikers." Sarah's hands maintain their steady work as she binds sage, sweetgrass, and cedar into small bundles, but her mind shifts through potential scenarios with the cool efficiency that once made her the most respected tracker among the tribal rangers. It's wise to be cautious of those who ask many questions while answering few, Sarah offers neutrally, though her mind has already categorized these strangers as a potential threat requiring closer observation. After Amanda leaves, Sarah moves to the large stone hearth at the back of her cabin, ostensibly to hang herbs for drying above the warm stones. The action allows her to glance out the rear window, confirming what she already suspects. One of the men in question stands at the edge of the forest, binoculars raised, studying the layout of the small community with methodical attention. Amateur surveillance, but purposeful. His stance and movement suggest military background, but his equipment is too expensive, too new. Private sector operator with formal training. The assessment comes automatically, years of tracking both animals and trespassers, categorizing potential threats with detached precision. The small bells chime again as Elder John Waters enters, his usually serene expression clouded with concern. "Sarah," he greets, his voice lower than usual, "I wanted to ensure you'll attend tonight's council. These outsiders have been pressing their questions more forcefully, and your perspective would be valuable. I've heard there are strangers interested in our northern boundaries," she responds, meeting his eyes with a steady gaze that makes the elder nod with understanding. "Yes, well, that's part of it," He glances around her empty cabin before continuing. "Between us, I don't trust their intentions. Their questions are too specific about our water rights, too interested in the old access roads that aren't on public maps, strange interests for supposed outdoor enthusiasts. Elder Waters doesn't notice how Sarah's posture shifts subtly, how her weight redistributes to her toes, how her hand rests near a beaded belt that could quickly become a garrote if needed. All unconscious preparations for potential threats that 5 years of peace haven't erased. "I appreciate the warning," she says simply. "I'll be there." After he leaves, Sarah moves with a new purpose. She slides aside a woven rug to reveal a trapdoor so perfectly fitted into the wooden floor that even those who visited her cabin for years have never detected it. Inside lies a small cache containing items unused for 5 years, a hunting knife of exceptional quality, a compact bow and quiver of arrows designed for silent efficiency, not ceremonial display, and a small container of earth-toned face paints that once helped her become virtually invisible in the forest. She removes a small leather pouch containing a satellite phone, deftly hidden from the community that believes she embraces only traditional ways. The phone connects to a secure network maintained by former colleagues from her time as head of the tribal ranger force, before her marriage, before the tragedy that left her both a widow and the sole survivor of an elite tracking unit. She types a brief message. Possible situation in Eagle Valley. 3 unknown subjects showing interest in water rights and old mining claims. Background check requested. The message goes to Jack Redhorn, a former tribal ranger, now working with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, who helped arrange her quiet retirement to this more traditional role after the ambush that claimed her husband's life. Jack understands her need for solitude, her choice to step away from the violence that had defined her earlier life, and her unspoken vow to never again take human life. While waiting for a response, Sarah does what she's done every day for 5 years. She checks her security measures. The cabin appears ordinary to community members, but it's designed with defensive principles that would impress military strategists. Multiple exit routes disguised as storage spaces, sight lines to all approaches, indigenous alarm systems using materials that would appear decorative to outsiders. 5 years of peace haven't dulled her preparedness. Each gathering expedition into the forest has allowed her to maintain her skills while appearing to simply collect healing plants. Each seasonal change has been an opportunity to refresh cached supplies hidden throughout the surrounding wilderness. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Her phone signals an incoming message. Subjects identified as employees of Pinnacle Resource Development. Company has a history of exploiting legal loopholes to access native resources, connected to incidents at Standing Rock, Pine Ridge. Primary. Subject is Thomas Blackwood, former Special Forces, dishonorable discharge, known for aggressive acquisition tactics. Sarah's mind calculates possibilities with cold efficiency. Blackwood's presence in Eagle Valley cannot be coincidence. Either he's been hired to find legal weaknesses in the tribe's water rights claims, or he's setting up for resource extraction in what he believes is vulnerable territory. Neither possibility bodes well for the community she's sworn to protect, a vow that preceded and would outlast her official roles. The afternoon passes with Sarah maintaining her careful routine, preparing medicines, receiving visitors, discussing traditional knowledge, with tribal members seeking her wisdom. To all appearances, she is simply Sarah Cloudwalker, the widow who turned to traditional healing after personal tragedy, a respected but private member of the community. Through her window, she observes Blackwood himself walking along the main, a path with Elder Waters, gesturing expansively while appearing to listen respectfully to the older man's words. Sarah reads the tension in the elder's shoulders, the way he keeps a careful distance from the stranger despite his diplomatic demeanor. Blackwood fits the description from Jack's intelligence. Tall, weathered face beneath an expensive outdoor. At the practiced ease of someone who wants to appear at home in nature but whose movements lack the organic flow of those truly connected to the land. Most telling is how his eyes scan the community with the same automatic assessment that Sarah performs daily, cataloging buildings, resources, and people with tactical efficiency. His gaze pauses on her cabin momentarily, and though she appears absorbed in hanging herbs to dry, Sarah notes how his attention lingers on details most would overlook. The unusual reinforcement of her door frame, the careful positioning of her garden stones that could provide cover if needed. For a moment, just a flicker, their eyes meet. Through the window, Sarah keeps her expression neutral, embodying the unassuming healer the community knows her to be. Blackwood's face reveals nothing, but she recognizes the subtle shift in his stance, the unconscious preparation for potential threat assessment. He's good. Not as good as she once was, but dangerous nonetheless. As afternoon fades toward evening, Sarah prepares for the tribal council meeting with careful consideration. She selects clothing that won't restrict movement, a traditional ribbon skirt that allows full range of motion, a shawl that could serve multiple tactical purposes if needed. She places 3 small river stones in her pocket, silent weapons she once could throw with lethal accuracy. To the community members, she'll appear as she always does, a traditional woman who honors her culture. Only she knows that every aspect of her appearance is calculated for optimal defensive capability. As Sarah locks her cabin door, she spots the black SUV parked near the cultural center, its occupants watching with professional disinterest that doesn't fool her for a moment. 5 years ago, she was the shield between her people and those who would exploit them, tracking poachers and trespassers through terrain considered impassable by outsiders. Now, as she walks toward the community center where Eagle Valley's tribal members are gathering, she feels that mantle settling across her shoulders once more. These people, Michael, who brings her sweetgrass, Amanda, who champions her medicine, Bundles, Elder Waters, who welcomed her back to traditional ways after her time away, have become her responsibility. Blackwood and whoever employs him have come to her community, her territory, threatening people under her protection. 5 years of peace have been her choice, but they've also been her preparation. Blackwood is about to learn why her code name among the tribal rangers was Ghost Eyes. She tracked without being tracked, observed without being observed, and those who threatened her people rarely walked back out of the forest under their own power. The evening light fades as Sarah Cloudwalker walks along Eagle Valley's main path toward the tribal council. To observers, she is merely a respected healer attending a community meeting. Only she knows that with each step, the hunter draws closer to returning. The tribal community center stands at the heart of Eagle Valley, its wooden structure adorned with traditional artwork and contemporary amenities that bridge ancient wisdom with present needs. As Sarah approaches, memories surface unbidden, fragments of a life she had carefully compartmentalized since returning to traditional ways. 12 years earlier, Sarah Cloudwalker had stood before the tribal council in this same building, not as a healer, but as the newly appointed head of the Blackfoot Conservation Rangers. At 31, she had already earned a reputation that extended far beyond reservation boundaries. State and federal agencies regularly requested her tracking expertise for their most challenging cases. "You find what cannot be found," Chief Daniel Running Bear had said during her appointment ceremony. "You move like the wind, seen only in what it touches, never in itself." Sarah pauses at the community center steps, the weight of that memory settling across her shoulders. The tribal rangers had been created to protect reservation lands from increasingly bold poachers and trespassers, but under her leadership they became something more. Guardians of sacred sites, protectors of water sources and the tribe's first line of defense against those who sought to exploit legal loopholes to access natural resources. Her team of 7 elite trackers could move through the most challenging terrain, leaving no trace of their passage. They could track a person across bare rock by the faintest disturbance of lichen. They could identify outsiders by the pattern of their footfalls alone. Under Sarah's leadership, the Rangers became legendary among state and federal agencies, calling in for the most challenging search and rescue operations and to track the most elusive fugitives. But it was her marriage to David Cloudwalker, the tribe's legal counsel, that had truly completed her life. Where she was action, he was thought. Where she was instinct, he was strategy. Together they had become the tribe's most effective defense against the constant threats to their sovereignty and resources. Sarah. The voice pulls her from memory. Michael Waters stands at the community center entrance, concern etched across his young face. "You okay? You've been standing there for a while." Sarah offers a reassuring smile. "Just gathering my thoughts," she answers, though in truth she had been calculating the time required to access her emergency cache in the northern forest should tonight's meeting confirm her suspicions about Blackwood. Inside, the community center hums with subdued conversation. Nearly every adult member of the small community is gathered, a testament to the seriousness of the situation. Elder Waters stands near the council table, deep in conversation with 3 other tribal elders. The council members' faces bear the gravity of leaders confronting a situation beyond the ordinary challenges of reservation life. Sarah takes a seat near the back wall, a position that affords clear sightlines to all entrances and most community members. It's a habit from her ranger days. Always position yourself to observe without being the focus of attention. From here, she can watch reactions, note alliances, and identify potential weaknesses in the community's unified front. Amanda Little. Feather slides into the seat beside her, voice low with urgency. "Those men were at the cultural center again today, asking about our water ceremony sites. They claimed to be interested in cultural preservation, but kept steering the conversation toward water rights and access to the northern canyon." Sarah nods, absorbing this information while scanning the room. "Did they take photographs?" "Tried to. I told them our sacred sites aren't for documentation," Amanda replies. "The tall one, Blackwood, he called himself, said something about satellite imagery making our preferences academic." This detail sharpens Sarah's attention. Satellite imagery suggested resources beyond what a small development company would typically access. Before she can inquire further, Elder Waters calls the meeting to order. "Friends, family, members of our community," he begins, his voice carrying the weight of leadership tempered by genuine concern. "As many of you know, we have visitors to our lands who express interest in what they call development opportunities. Today, I want to share what we've learned about these visitors and discuss how we should proceed." He gestures to Lisa Running, Deer, the tribe's current legal counsel who had taken over after David's death. Lisa, a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and a lawyer's precise diction, stands with a folder in hand. "Pinnacle Resource Development has a troubling history with tribal lands," she begins without preamble. "They specialize in identifying legal vulnerabilities in resource protection agreements, particularly around water rights. In the past 5 years, they've been involved in disputes with 7 different tribal nations." Sarah listens intently, her external demeanor calm, while her mind catalogues each piece of information against her own observations. Lisa continues, outlining Pinnacle's tactics, creating shell companies to purchase adjacent lands, finding splits within tribal leadership, exploiting outdated treaty language. Their presence here is particularly concerning because of our northern water sources. Lisa explains, unfolding a map across the council table. The springs in the northern canyon feed both our reservation and 3 downstream communities. Current drought conditions make these water rights increasingly valuable. Elder Waters steps forward again. What Lisa hasn't mentioned is that these men have been approaching individual community members, suggesting that partnership with Pinnacle could bring prosperity through resource development. They're looking for divisions they can exploit. The room stirs with uneasy murmurs. Sarah remains still, her attention shifting to study the reactions of each community member. She notes who appears concerned, who seems intrigued by promises of prosperity, who looks to others before forming their own reaction. Old tracking habits applied to human behavior, reading signs, identifying patterns, predicting movements. There's more, Lisa adds, her voice tightening. We've discovered that Thomas Blackwood, their lead representative, has a military background in special operations, followed by private security work for extraction companies in disputed territories internationally. He's not here for a friendly business partnership. This confirmation of Sarah's initial assessment sends a cold current of memory through her. 5 years ago, men with similar backgrounds had come to the reservation borders, claiming to represent energy exploration interests. That confrontation had escalated from legal threats to violence with shocking speed. The ambush had been carefully planned. Sarah's ranger team, accompanying David to document illegal survey markers on sacred land, had been targeted with military precision. Only Sarah's extraordinary tracking and survival skills had allowed her to evade the attackers after witnessing her husband and colleagues fall. The official investigation ruled it a tragic case of mistaken identity by armed drug traffickers. Sarah alone knew the truth. The surveyors had eliminated witnesses to their illegal activities, and someone had ensured the investigation would reach no other conclusion. "What options do we have?" asks an elderly woman whose grandson attends the tribal college on a water conservation scholarship. Lisa outlines legal protections, tribal ordinances, possible injunctions, the tools of paperwork and courts that seem flimsy shields against men like Blackwood. Sarah listens, her face betraying nothing of the tactical assessments forming in her mind. "We should hear all perspectives," Elder Waters says with diplomatic care. "Does anyone have thoughts they wish to share?" Several community members speak. Some urging immediate legal action, others suggesting dialogue might reveal Pinnacle's true intentions. A few wondering if some limited partnership might benefit the tribe without compromising essential resources. Sarah remains silent, watching. When the discussion begins to circle back upon itself, Elder Waters turns to her with deliberate intent. "Sarah Cloudwalker, you've been quiet. Before you became our healer, you dealt with many who approached our borders with hidden intentions. What do you see in these visitors?" The room quiets. Though many newer community members know Sarah only as the skilled healer living at the forest's edge, the older residents remember her former role. Some recall how wildlife poachers once spoke her name with fear, how trespassers found themselves mysteriously turned around in trails they thought they knew, emerging miles from their intended targets. Sarah meets Elder Waters' gaze, understanding. He has called upon her for a reason. He is reminding the community of resources beyond legal filings and council resolutions. "Men like Blackwood understand only strength and territory," she says, her voice carrying that distinctive quality that draws listeners closer. "They test boundaries looking for weakness. If they find none, they seek easier targets." She chooses her words carefully, balancing truth with the peaceful image she has cultivated these past 5 years. "We should maintain our unified position on water rights, certainly," she continues, "but we should also ensure these visitors understand our boundaries are well monitored. They should never move through our lands without awareness that they are observed." Her meaning is clear to those who remember her former skills, though couched in language that maintains her current identity as healer rather than hunter. "Thank you, Sarah," Elder Waters says with a slight nod that acknowledges her measured response. "Perhaps you might help coordinate our young people in observing our borders more actively during this time. It is not a request, but a carefully considered invitation for her to step partially back into her former role without publicly acknowledging the shift." Sarah inclines her head in acceptance, feeling the weight of responsibility settling across her shoulders once more. As the meeting continues, Sarah's mind works on multiple levels, present in the council discussions while simultaneously developing surveillance strategies, identifying which young community members have the skills to assist, calculating resource requirements and timeframes. When the formal meeting concludes, community members linger in small groups, the gravity of the situation evident in their subdued conversations. Amanda approaches Sarah, her expression troubled. "You think this is serious, don't you? More than just aggressive business tactics." Sarah meets her friend's gaze directly. "Pinnacle doesn't send men like Blackwood for simple negotiations. They're preparing for something beyond legal challenges." Amanda absorbs this, then asks the question that has hovered unspoken throughout the evening. Is it like before? Like what happened to David and the others? The directness of the question catches Sarah momentarily off guard. Few in the community reference the tragedy directly in her presence, a well-intentioned consideration that sometimes feels like erasure of her husband's memory. "There are similarities," Sarah acknowledges, her voice steady despite the sudden tightness in her chest. "But there are also differences. Last time, we didn't recognize the threat until too late. This time, we see them clearly. What she doesn't say, what she has told no one in the 5 years since the ambush, is that she has spent countless hours piecing together the truth of what happened that day. How the accident report contained deliberate misinformation, how key evidence disappeared, how witnesses changed their statements after mysterious meetings with federal officials. "Will you train some of us again?" Amanda asks, her question carrying layers of meaning beyond its surface. "Just basic observation skills like before? Before Sarah became Ghost Eyes, before she led the tribal rangers, before she tracked cartel members across 60 miles of wilderness to rescue a kidnapped tribal youth, before her name became both respected and feared across 3 states. Some skills would be useful for everyone," Sarah agrees carefully. "Recognizing when you're being followed, identifying signs of trespass, keeping accurate records of outsider movements. What she doesn't mention are the more specialized skills she might need to reactivate, how to move invisibly through territory under surveillance, how to neutralize electronic monitoring equipment, how to track multiple subjects simultaneously across diverse terrain. Skills she had packed away with her ranger gear and ceremonial face paint 5 years ago, vowing never to need them again." As community members begin to depart, Lisa Running Deer approaches, a legal folder clutched tight against her chest. "Sarah," she begins with the slight awkwardness that has characterized their interactions since Lisa took over David's former position. "Elder Waters suggested I share something with you privately." She glances around to ensure they won't be overheard. "We've received reports that Pinnacle has hired external security consultants, former military contractors with," she hesitates, "with expertise in managing indigenous resistance." The careful phrasing doesn't disguise the implicit threat. Sarah has encountered such men before, mercenaries who view tribal sovereignty as an inconvenient obstacle to profit, who consider native lives expendable in resource disputes. "How reliable is this information?" Sarah asks, her tone revealing nothing of the tactical calculations already forming in her mind. "Very. Our contact at the regional BIA office provided documentation," Lisa replies, then adds with significance, "Jack Redhorn made sure it reached me directly." The mention of Jack, Sarah's former colleague and occasional contact with federal agencies, confirms the seriousness of the situation. If Jack is activating old networks, he believes the threat warrants extraordinary measures. "Thank you," Sarah says simply. "Is there anything else I should know?" Lisa hesitates, then adds, "Satellite imagery shows unusual activity at the abandoned logging camp 10 miles north of our border. Vehicles coming and going at irregular hours, too many for simple surveying work, a staging area, tactical preparation." Sarah's assessment of Blackwood shifts from concern to active threat. The abandoned logging camp offers strategic advantages. Road access to the northern canyon while remaining outside tribal jurisdiction, multiple approaches to the reservation's most vulnerable boundary, proximity to the watershed that feeds the reservation's water supply. As Sarah walks back to her cabin through the gathering darkness, her mind transitions fully to the tactical awareness she had maintained during her years as Ghost Eyes. Every shadow holds potential information. Every sound carries meaning. Every change in the night breeze suggests movement or stillness among the trees. At the cabin, she moves with newfound purpose. From beneath hand-woven rugs and behind seemingly solid walls, she retrieves equipment cached 5 years earlier. Topographical maps annotated with trails known only to tribal members, communication devices that operate on frequencies ignored by standard monitoring equipment, a compact field kit containing everything needed to survive undetected in the wilderness for weeks. Sarah changes into darker clothing that blends with forest shadows, applying a thin layer of protective ointment to her exposed skin, ostensibly to shield against insects, but actually reducing her thermal signature against night vision equipment. She braids her hair tightly against her head, every movement demonstrating the muscle memory of preparations made hundreds of times before. From a hidden compartment beneath her medicine preparation table, she retrieves a small leather bundle, wrapped in protective cloth. Inside lies the tangible connection to her former identity, a necklace of carved bone and special stones that tribal rangers wore concealed beneath their clothing, identifying them to each other even when disguised. For tracking operations, Sarah holds it momentarily, the weight familiar in her hand despite 5 years of disuse. Then with ceremonial reverence, she places it around her neck, tucking it beneath her clothing, where it rests against her skin like a recently awakened memory. 5 years ago, she had packed away Ghost Eyes along with her grief, choosing the healer's path as both penance and protection. Tonight, as Blackwood and his men plot against her community, she acknowledges what she has always known. The hunter never truly disappeared. She moves toward her cabin door, ritual preparation complete. Tonight, she will observe without being observed, track without leaving a sign, and gather intelligence that no official report will record. Tonight, Ghost Eyes returns to the shadows, not as a ranger or widow, but as something both more ancient and more enduring, protector of her people. As Sarah Cloudwalker slips silently into the darkness, even the night creatures fall momentarily silent, recognizing the return of a hunter to the land. The abandoned logging camp sits in a shallow valley 10 miles north of the reservation boundary, its weathered structures reclaimed by nature over the 2 decades since operations ceased. Rusted equipment stands like industrial sculptures among resilient saplings, while the former administrative building, the only structure with intact walls and roof, now serves a purpose far from its original function. "Sarah," she begins with the slight awkwardness that has characterized their interactions since Lisa took over David's former position. "Elder Waters suggested I share something with you privately." She glances around to ensure they won't be overheard. "We've received reports that Pinnacle has hired external security consultants, former military contractors with," she hesitates, "with expertise in managing indigenous resistance." The careful phrasing doesn't disguise the implicit threat. Sarah has encountered such men before, mercenaries who view tribal sovereignty as an inconvenient obstacle to profit, who consider native lives expendable in resource disputes. How reliable is this information? Sarah asks, her tone revealing nothing of the tactical calculations already forming in her mind. Very. Our contact at the regional BIA office provided documentation, Lisa replies, then adds with significance, Jack Redhorn made sure it reached me directly. The mention of Jack, Sarah's former colleague and occasional contact with federal agencies, confirms the seriousness of the situation. If Jack is activating old networks, he believes the threat warrants extraordinary measures. Thank you. Sarah says simply, is there anything else I should know? Lisa hesitates, then adds, satellite imagery shows unusual activity at the abandoned logging camp 10 miles north of our border. Vehicles coming and going at irregular hours, too many for simple surveying work, a staging area, tactical preparation. Sarah's assessment of Blackwood shifts from concern to active threat. The abandoned logging camp offers strategic advantages. Road access to the northern canyon while remaining outside tribal jurisdiction, multiple approaches to the reservation's most vulnerable boundary, proximity to the watershed that feeds the reservation's water supply. As Sarah walks back to her cabin through the gathering darkness, her mind transitions fully to the tactical awareness she had maintained during her years as Ghost Eyes. Every shadow holds potential information. Every sound carries meaning. Every change in the night breeze suggests movement or stillness among the trees. At the cabin, she moves with newfound purpose. From beneath hand-woven rugs and behind seemingly solid walls, she retrieves equipment cached 5 years earlier. Topographical maps annotated with trails known only to tribal members, communication devices that operate on frequencies ignored by standard monitoring equipment, a compact field kit containing everything needed to survive undetected in the wilderness for weeks. Sarah changes into darker clothing that blends with forest shadows, applying a thin layer of protective ointment to her exposed skin, ostensibly to shield against insects, but actually reducing her thermal signature against night vision equipment. She braids her hair tightly against her head, every movement demonstrating the muscle memory of preparations made hundreds of times before. From a hidden compartment beneath her medicine preparation table, she retrieves a small leather bundle, wrapped in protective cloth. Inside lies the tangible connection to her former identity, a necklace of carved bone and special stones that tribal rangers wore concealed beneath their clothing, identifying them to each other even when disguised. For tracking operations, Sarah holds it momentarily, the weight familiar in her hand despite 5 years of disuse. Then with ceremonial reverence, she places it around her neck, tucking it beneath her clothing, where it rests against her skin like a recently awakened memory. 5 years ago, she had packed away Ghost Eyes along with her grief, choosing the healer's path as both penance and protection. Tonight, as Blackwood and his men plot against her community, she acknowledges what she has always known. The hunter never truly disappeared. She moves toward her cabin door, ritual preparation complete. Tonight, she will observe without being observed, track without leaving a sign, and gather intelligence that no official report will record. Tonight, Ghost Eyes returns to the shadows, not as a ranger or widow, but as something both more ancient and more enduring, protector of her people, as Sarah Cloudwalker slips silently into the darkness. Even the night creatures fall momentarily silent, recognizing the return of a hunter to the land. The abandoned logging camp sits in a shallow valley 10 miles north of the reservation boundary, its weathered structures reclaimed by nature over the 2 decades since operations ceased. Rusted equipment stands like industrial sculptures among resilient saplings, while the former administrative building, the only structure with intact walls and roof, now serves a purpose far from its original function. Blackwood studies the limited information with narrowed eyes. Current status? Lives on the reservation, some kind of traditional healer or medicine woman now. Keeps to herself. Blackwood's expression suggests dissatisfaction with this thin profile. Get me more. Anyone with specialized security training remains relevant to our operational planning. Our primary focus should be the legal framework, Carson reminds him with corporate precision. Pinnacle expects minimal complications in securing access to these water resources. The acquisition timeline doesn't accommodate extended negotiations. The timeline will accommodate whatever is necessary for operational security. Blackwood counters, his tone final. Pinnacle hired my team because previous acquisitions encountered unexpected resistance. My job is to ensure that doesn't happen here. Carson's lips tighten into a professional smile that doesn't reach her eyes. Of course. I'm simply emphasizing that corporations expect results within the established time frame. Blackwood turns back to the map, effectively ending the discussion. Miller, I want comprehensive surveillance expanded to include all access points to the Northern Canyon. Hayes, dig deeper on this former ranger unit, particularly anyone still on the reservation. I want to know what capabilities we might be facing. He traces the contour lines representing the canyon's geography. Tomorrow we move to Phase 2, direct engagement with selected community members. Carson will identify potential leverage points for individual agreements that might undermine collective tribal positions. The tribal meeting tonight showed significant unity, Hayes notes, indicating feeds showing community members returning to their homes. They're aware of our presence and suspicious of our intentions. Community unity is always fragile when resources are involved, Blackwood responds with the confidence of experience. Find their internal divisions, their individual needs, their vulnerabilities. Everyone has a price or a pressure point. As his team disperses to their assigned tasks, Blackwood remains studying the map, his mind calculating approaches and contingencies with military precision. Pinnacle Resources has hired him for a specific outcome, securing unrestricted access to the water resources beneath tribal lands, and his reputation depends on delivering results. The tribal community's resistance is an anticipated complication, one he has overcome in similar operations from South Dakota to Arizona. His methodology is systematic, refined through years of experience in environments far more hostile than this small reservation. Yet something about this assignment triggers his professional caution. Perhaps it's the discrepancy between the reservation's apparent lack of security infrastructure and the historical records of their once elite ranger unit. Or perhaps it's the unanswered questions surrounding the unit's disbandment after the ambush 5 years ago. Whatever the source of his unease, Blackwood has survived this long by respecting his instincts. He returns to the computer, accessing the limited file on Sarah Cloudwalker. The photograph shows a younger woman in ranger uniform, her expression serious, her eyes holding the focused awareness he recognizes from his own special operations. Training. Ghost eyes, he murmurs, reading the code name listed in her historical file. Something about the designation stirs his professional curiosity. He makes a note to prioritize gathering intelligence on this particular community member, then returns to operational planning with methodical focus. 20 miles away, concealed in the shadows of a pine stand overlooking the logging camp, Sarah. Cloudwalker observes the illuminated administrative building through specialized binoculars. Her stillness is complete, her breathing synchronized with the forest's natural rhythm, rendering her virtually indistinguishable from her surroundings. For 3 hours, she has maintained this observation position, mentally cataloguing every detail. The number of vehicles, 7 including 2 with government contractor plates, the patrol patterns of security personnel, methodical but with a predictable gap every 40 minutes, the electronic surveillance equipment visible on the building's exterior, motion sensors, cameras with infrared capability, satellite uplink. This is no simple resource development company establishing a temporary base for survey work. The security, measures, equipment, and personnel all speak to something more deliberate, more prepared for resistance than typical corporate ventures. Sarah lowers her binoculars, processing this information against her earlier assessments. Blackwood has established a forward operating base with defensive capabilities and surveillance infrastructure. The positioning near the watershed that feeds the reservation's water supply suggests their primary target. The immediate question is whether their approach will be legal manipulation, as with many corporate intrusions on tribal lands, or something more direct. A slight shift in the wind brings new information, the faint, distinctive odor of gun oil and the specific polymer used in tactical body armor. Sarah's senses, honed through decades of tracking, catalog these details automatically. The security personnel aren't merely equipped with standard sidearms. They carry tactical gear consistent with paramilitary operations. Confirmation of armed. Presence transforms her assessment from concern to alert. She begins a mental inventory of the reservation's defensive vulnerabilities, the unmonitored access points along the northern boundary, the limited communication infrastructure between outlying homes, the concentration of tribal police resources around central community buildings rather than perimeter security. With practiced silence, Sarah withdraws from her observation position, moving through the forest with a fluidity born from intimate knowledge of the terrain. Where others would snap twigs or disturb undergrowth, she passes like a shadow, each footfall placed with deliberate precision between delicate plants or upon surfaces that absorb sound. 3 miles from the logging camp, she reaches the first of her cached equipment sites, a hollow tree marked with a pattern of notches that appears natural but serves as a sign recognizable only to those trained in ranger techniques. From within, she retrieves a waterproof package containing communication equipment more sophisticated than anything the tribal community currently maintains. The encrypted satellite phone connects after 2 brief signals. Redhorn, answers a voice on the other end, alert despite the late hour. Jacket's ghost eyes, Sarah responds, using her former designation for the first time in 5 years. I have confirmation. Level? Jack Redhorn asks, the years falling away as they resume the shorthand communication developed during operations together. Blackwood has established a forward base at the old logging camp, paramilitary security, surveillance equipment, legal, representative on site. This isn't standard corporate encroachment. A brief silence as Jack processes this information. Federal position remains complicated. Official channels require evidence of specific criminal activity before authorizing intervention on non-reservation land. The diplomatic phrasing confirms what Sarah already suspected. No official help would be forthcoming until the situation deteriorated beyond peaceful resolution. Understood, she responds. I'll maintain observation and report developments. Be advised, their surveillance capabilities are substantial. Communication with community members may be compromised. Acknowledged. Resources available if required. The exchange concludes with practiced efficiency, each understanding the limitations of their positions. Jack, now working within federal constraints, can offer information and potentially resources, but no official intervention without documented criminal activity. Sarah, no longer operating in any official capacity, has freedom of movement, but limited backup. As she secures the communication equipment and continues her silent journey through the forest, Sarah calculates next steps with tactical precision. The community needs to be warned about surveillance without creating panic. Young tribal members with outdoor skills need basic training in counter-surveillance techniques. Emergency communication protocols need to be established using methods Blackwood's team won't anticipate. By the time she reaches the reservation boundary, marked only by subtle signs recognizable to tribal members, Sarah has developed a preliminary security framework adapted to current circumstances. Not the formal protocols of her ranger days, but something more flexible, more in harmony with the community's current capabilities and structure. The eastern sky shows the first faint lightening of approaching dawn as she approaches her cabin. With practiced awareness, she scans for signs of surveillance or intrusion before approaching. Nothing appears disturbed, yet her instincts suggest caution. Inside, she follows a precise security routine disguised as a traditional morning ceremony, checking sight lines through windows, verifying that subtle markers placed near entry points remain undisturbed, ensuring her emergency equipment remains accessible but concealed. Sarah changes into her familiar healer's clothing, practical but traditional garments that maintain her established identity while concealing the fact that she's spent the night tracking through wilderness. She begins her morning fire, heating water for tea with the deliberate movements expected of a woman. Following ceremonial practices, to any observer she appears to be simply beginning her day with traditional rituals. Only when these security and cover measures are complete does she allow herself to fully process what she's observed. Blackwood's operation carries all the hallmarks of Pinnacle's previous tactics on tribal lands, establishing position near crucial resources, deploying surveillance before direct engagement, bringing legal representatives to exploit treaty vulnerabilities, maintaining security forces beyond what legitimate business activities would require. The approach is systematic, professional, and backed by corporate resources that far exceed what a small tribal community can marshal in conventional resistance. In her former role as head ranger, Sarah would have coordinated with federal agencies, documented legal violations, established a security perimeter with her trained team. Now, operating without official position or resources, she must adapt different strategies, working through community networks, training selected individuals in basic security awareness, establishing observation of Blackwood's operation without revealing her involvement. The satellite phone vibrates silently, indicating an encrypted message. The brief text from Jack contains information that transforms her tactical assessment. Confirmation: Blackwood connected to White River Incident 2018. 3 tribal members are missing after a protest against resource development. Officially ruled as leaving reservation voluntarily. Sarah's expression remains neutral, though the information sends a cold current through her tactical calculations. The White River incident had been discussed among tribal security networks as a disturbing case, where vocal opponents of a mining project disappeared during negotiations. Official reports suggested they had chosen to leave, but tribal accounts indicated a more troubling scenario. This connection elevates Blackwood from aggressive corporate representative to specific threat against community members who oppose Pinnacle's objectives. Her response protocols shift accordingly, moving from observation and intelligence gathering to more direct protective measures. As the morning advances, Sarah maintains her healer routine, grinding herbs and preparing medicines while mentally cataloging defensive resources. Which community members have relevant skills? Where can observation points be established without alerting Blackwood's surveillance? How can vulnerable community members be protected without creating obvious security measures that might escalate? The situation, the first test of her adapted strategies, comes sooner than expected. Through her window, she observes a black SUV moving slowly along the main road through the community, its tinted windows concealing occupants while allowing full observation of tribal activities. The vehicle pauses near key locations: the community center, the tribal council building, the cultural center, in a pattern that suggests methodical surveillance rather than casual exploration. When the vehicle approaches her cabin, Sarah continues her medicine preparation with apparent absorption in her task. In reality, her awareness catalogues every detail: the sound of the engine suggesting recent maintenance, the slight depression of the suspension indicating heavy equipment inside, the precise distance maintained from buildings suggesting someone, measuring sightlines and potential coverage areas. The SUV stops directly across from her cabin. Through peripheral vision, she notes two occupants in the front seats, their profiles suggesting the security personnel she observed at the logging camp, rather than Blackwood himself or the corporate representative. Sarah continues grinding herbs. With deliberate movements, the picture of a traditional healer, unaware or unconcerned with outside observation. When the rear window lowers slightly, she detects the faint electronic signature of surveillance equipment, likely documenting her cabin's location, construction, and surroundings. After several minutes of observation, the vehicle continues down the road. Sarah makes no obvious reaction, maintaining her healer's routine while mentally noting every detail of the encounter for later analysis. The direct surveillance of her specific location suggests either random documentation of all community buildings or, more concerning, particular interest in her position. The answer comes within the hour, when Michael Waters arrives with unusual urgency in his young step. "Ms. Cloudwalker," he begins, slightly breathless, "those men in the black SUV, they've been asking specific questions about you at the trading post." Sarah continues her work with unbroken focus. "What kind of questions?" "About your background, how long you've lived here, whether you travel off reservation often." Michael shifts uneasily. "Grandfather said I should tell you directly." "Thank you, Michael," she responds, with the calm demeanor expected of her current identity. "Perhaps they're interested in traditional medicine. Many outsiders find our healing practices fascinating." Her mild response is calculated to reassure the young man while revealing nothing of her internal tactical reassessment. Blackwood's specific interest confirms her earlier concern. He's identified her former role and is evaluating her as a potential security complication. "There's more," Michael adds with the directness of youth. "Lisa Running Deer said they've been asking for copies of all legal documents related to the Northern Watershed, and they've requested a meeting with the Tribal Council tomorrow, saying they have a time-sensitive proposal that could benefit the entire community." This accelerated timeline triggers Sarah's professional caution. Corporate encroachment typically begins with extended legal exploration before moving to direct engagement. Blackwood's rapid progression suggests either unusual urgency or confidence in his position. "The council will consider their request appropriately," Sarah offers neutrally, though her mind immediately begins calculating countermeasures. "In the meantime, Michael, would you be willing to help me gather some specific plants today? I find myself needing crow root and blue sage rather urgently." The request seems innocuous, a healer asking for assistance with gathering medicinal plants. But crow root grows primarily near the reservation's northern boundary, offering legitimate reason to observe the areas most vulnerable to incursion from the logging camp. Blue sage, while common throughout the region, provides excellent cover for examining soil conditions, including identifying fresh tracks or surveillance equipment. "Sure thing, Ms. Cloudwalker," Michael agrees readily. "Grandfather said I should make myself available to you however needed." The phrasing confirms what Sarah had suspected during the council meeting. Elder Waters has tacitly authorized her to resume elements of her former security role without official acknowledgement. By sending his grandson, he's providing both assistance and a communication channel that bypasses potentially compromised electronic methods. Excellent. We'll leave in 30 minutes. Wear your hiking boots and bring water. The northern ridge requires proper preparation. As Michael departs to prepare, Sarah makes her own arrangements with methodical efficiency. Into a traditional medicine gathering bag, she places not only the expected tools of her healer role, but also carefully concealed surveillance countermeasures, devices that can detect and temporarily disrupt electronic monitoring without revealing their presence. The day's gathering expedition will serve multiple purposes: training Michael in basic security awareness, conducting a survey of reservation boundaries for signs of intrusion, establishing observation points for monitoring Blackwood's operation, and creating the foundation for community defense measures beyond what their limited tribal police can provide. As she completes her preparations, Sarah acknowledges the reality she has been moving toward since first observing Blackwood's team. The peaceful life she has cultivated these past 5 years has reached a decisive juncture. The careful separation between Sarah the healer and Ghost Eyes, the tracker, has begun to dissolve, not by her choice, but by necessity. The community that has given her purpose beyond grief now faces a threat beyond their ordinary experience. Responding to that threat requires capabilities she alone possesses: the ability to track without being tracked, to observe without being observed, to understand an adversary's intentions by the subtlest signs they leave upon the land. The community that has given her purpose beyond grief now faces a threat beyond their ordinary experience. Responding to that threat requires capabilities she alone possesses: the ability to track without being tracked, to observe without being observed, to understand an adversary's intentions by the subtlest signs they leave upon the land. As Sarah steps outside to await Michael's return, the morning sun illuminates her face, highlighting the quiet determination that has replaced her healer's serene expression. Blackwood has made his first moves with professional calculation. Now Ghost Eyes will respond, not with the official authority of her former position, but with something more enduring: the ancient responsibility of a protector to her people and their sacred lands. Dawn breaks over Eagle Valley with gentle persistence, painting the eastern sky in watercolor brushstrokes of amber and rose. Sarah Cloudwalker rises before the sun, as she has every day for the past 5 years, beginning her morning with a ceremonial cleansing that serves dual purposes: spiritual preparation for her healer's work and tactical readiness for whatever challenges the day might bring. She moves through her cabin with practiced efficiency, building a small sacred fire in the stone hearth where she will later prepare medicines. The act of gathering kindling, arranging it in the traditional pattern, and bringing flame to life through friction rather than modern means demonstrates both her commitment to cultural practices and her self-sufficient capabilities. As water heats for morning tea, Sarah performs a series of stretching movements that appear to casual observers as traditional preparation for medicine gathering. The fluid motions, however, maintain the physical conditioning required for extended tracking and potential combat. Each stretch targeting specific muscle groups essential for wilderness movement. Each balanced pose preserving the body control that once made her Ghost Eyes. The ritual complete, she steps outside to greet the morning, scanning the perimeter of her property with practiced ease that disguises her tactical assessment. Nothing appears disturbed from the previous evening, though the subtle compression of soil near her garden suggests nighttime visitors, likely deer rather than human intruders, based on the distinctive pattern and depth. Today's schedule includes several healing consultations in her cabin, gathering specific plants needed for seasonal medicines, and teaching a small group of tribal youth about traditional plant knowledge. a schedule known to the community that provides perfect cover for her actual objectives. Establishing surveillance of Blackwood's team, training selected young people in basic security awareness, and preparing emergency contingencies should the situation escalate. Sarah returns inside, preparing for the day's public role. She arranges her healing space with meticulous care, each medicine pouch and ceremonial item placed with precision that creates both the appropriate spiritual atmosphere and optimal access should any item need to be reached quickly. The arrangement appears traditional to visitors, but follows tactical principles of movement economy and defensive positioning. Michael Waters arrives precisely at 7, his young face serious with the responsibility entrusted to him by both his grandfather and Sarah herself. "Good morning, Ms. Cloudwalker," he greets formally, though his alert posture suggests his awareness that today's activities extend beyond simple plant gathering. "Good morning, Michael," Sarah responds, handing him a small cup of tea. "Before we begin our gathering, I thought we might discuss which plants are best observed rather than collected." The phrasing is deliberate, initiating his training in observation techniques while maintaining plausible conversation about traditional plant knowledge should anyone be listening. Sarah has swept her cabin for electronic surveillance devices, that morning finding none, but 5 years of peace haven't erased her operational caution. "Some medicines are most powerful when we learn from how they grow," she continues, unfolding a hand-drawn map that appears to show traditional plant locations throughout the reservation. In reality, the map marks key observation points, potential security vulnerabilities, and optimal routes for moving undetected near reservation boundaries. "Today, we'll focus on plants that grow along the northern ridge," Sarah explains, tracing a path that would take them to elevated positions overlooking both the reservation's northern border and the logging camp beyond. The sacred crow root thrives where it can watch over both forest and valley. Michael absorbs this instruction with quiet intensity, his intelligence recognizing the dual meaning in her words. Though young, he carries the understanding of tribal youth raised with awareness of the constant threats to their sovereignty and resources. "Should we bring additional gathering bags?" he asks, the question carrying his own layered meaning. Sarah nods with approval at his quick adaptation. "Yes, different medicines require different carriers." From a cedar chest near her medicine preparation area, she retrieves several traditional gathering bags of varying sizes. Into these, she places not only the expected tools of a medicine woman, small digging implements, cutting tools, specific cloths for wrapping plants, but also carefully disguised survival and observation equipment. A compact monocular disguised as a ceremonial pipe, water purification tablets within what appears to be a pouch of sacred minerals, emergency communication equipment sewn into the lining of the largest bag. "These medicines connect us to our ancestors," Sarah explains as she works, her voice carrying the measured cadence expected of a traditional teacher while conveying operational information. "They remind us how our people have always protected what is sacred through careful observation of the world around us." With preparations complete, Sarah leads Michael from her cabin along a path that appears to casual observers as a standard route for plant gathering. Only someone with tactical training would recognize how the path provides continuous cover, maintains optimal sightlines, and allows for immediate defensive positioning if needed. As they walk, Sarah begins Michael's instruction with natural subtlety, weaving traditional knowledge with security awareness in seamless conversation. "Notice how the yarrow grows," she directs, pausing beside a cluster of white flowering plants, always facing the direction with greatest visibility. "Medicine plants teach us to maintain awareness of our surroundings." Michael kneels beside the plants, studying them with genuine interest while absorbing the security principle embedded in her teaching. When gathering, Sarah continues, demonstrating the proper technique, always position yourself to observe approaches from multiple directions. This honors the plant's wisdom while ensuring your own safety. Throughout the morning, these lessons continue, traditional plant knowledge interwoven with basic security awareness. Sarah teaches Michael to identify different types of soil compression that indicate recent passage, to distinguish between animal and human disturbance of vegetation, to recognize natural movement patterns versus those that suggest intentional concealment. Our ancestors survived by reading the land as clearly as we read books, she explains, as they pause near a small stream to drink water. The bent grass stem, the displaced stone, the pattern of disturbed dew, all tell stories to those who know how to listen. Michael proves an apt student, his young mind quickly grasping connections between traditional knowledge and practical security applications. By mid-morning, he successfully identifies 3 different animal trails and 1 human footprint that Sarah herself had left the previous night as a test. "You have good eyes," she commands, with genuine appreciation. The ability to see what others miss is a rare gift. As they approach the northern ridge, Sarah's manner shifts subtly, her movements becoming more deliberate, her attention to their surroundings more focused. This area borders the watershed that Blackwood's team has targeted, making it likely territory for expanded surveillance or preliminary intrusion. "Now we practice different medicine," she says quietly, leading Michael to a concealed position overlooking a natural game trail that connects reservation land to the forest beyond. The medicine of watchfulness. From her gathering bag, Sarah removes what appears to be a traditional resting mat woven from natural fibers. When unfolded, however, it creates not only a comfortable ground covering, but also additional concealment, its colors and patterns breaking up their human silhouettes against the natural background. Watchfulness requires patience and stillness, she instructs, demonstrating how to position himself for extended observation without creating muscle fatigue. Your breath becomes the forest's breath, your heartbeat matches the rhythm of the land. For the next hour, they maintain silent observation of the game trail and surrounding forest. Sarah notes with approval how quickly Michael adapts to the discipline of stillness, a rare quality in one so young. His natural aptitude reminds her of trainees she had selected for specialized tracking operations during her ranger years. Their patience is rewarded when 2 figures emerge from the forest. Beyond reservation boundaries, moving with the deliberate care of men attempting to remain undetected. Through her monocular, disguised as a ceremonial pipe, Sarah identifies them as security personnel from Blackwood's team, carrying what appear to be small devices for placing surveillance equipment. She makes a subtle hand signal to Michael, directing his attention toward the intruders, while indicating the need for continued silence and stillness. Together, they observe as the men place small cameras and motion sensors at strategic points along the game trail, positions that would monitor movement between reservation lands and the watershed area. When the men withdraw, Sarah waits an additional 20 minutes, ensuring they have truly departed, rather than maintaining hidden observation. Only then does she speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "What did you observe?" Michael responds with impressive detail, noting not only the obvious surveillance equipment, but also subtle indicators of the men's training and purpose. Their boot type suggesting military background, their equipment cases marked with small symbols indicating electronic surveillance gear, their methodical coverage of approach routes rather than random placement. "Good. Now we observe without being observed," Sarah says, carefully making her way down from their position toward the newly placed surveillance equipment. "Watch how I move, and then follow exactly in my steps." What follows is a practical demonstration of the tracking skills that once made Ghost Eyes legendary. Sarah moves across ground, that would reveal footprints to most people without leaving discernible signs of passage, stepping on stones rather than soil, using natural vegetation to distribute her weight, moving in patterns that disrupt predictable tracking. She approaches the first surveillance device, a small camera disguised as a bird's nest attached to a tree overlooking the game trail. Rather than disabling or removing it, which would alert Blackwood's team to interference, she examines its position, field of view, and transmission capabilities without touching the device. We must understand what they see so we can move where they cannot look, she explains when Michael joins her, having successfully followed her path without leaving obvious signs. Knowledge of the hunter's position gives advantage to the hunted. Throughout the morning, they locate and catalog 7 different surveillance devices along the reservation's northern boundary: cameras, motion sensors, and what appears to be sophisticated audio monitoring equipment. Sarah documents each location on her traditional plant map using symbols that would appear as medicinal notations to casual observers. Now we gather actual medicines, she directs, as they complete their survey. Our primary purpose must remain visible, while our secondary work remains hidden. They spend the next hour collecting specific plants needed for Sarah's healing work, their gathering patterns deliberately taking them away from surveillance coverage while appearing to be normal activity. Sarah uses this time to continue Michael's instruction, now focusing on how to move through monitored areas without triggering detection. Notice how the deer creates multiple paths rather than a single trail, she explains, pointing out game patterns through the underbrush. Movement that appears random is harder to predict or monitor. By midday, they return toward the community center, approaching from a direction that would appear natural for plant gatherers, while actually allowing Sarah to observe central community areas for signs of Blackwood's presence. Her assessment confirms what she had anticipated. The black SUV now parked near the Tribal Council building, suggesting the time-sensitive proposal is being presented earlier than expected. Michael, take these medicines to my cabin, she directs, handing him the gathering bags containing actual plants. Then find your grandfather and tell him the northern crow root is more abundant than expected. He will understand. The coded message will alert Elder Waters to the extensive surveillance discovered along the northern boundary, while not alarming Michael unnecessarily. Sarah herself approaches the community center with the unhurried pace expected of her healer persona, nothing in her demeanor revealing her heightened tactical awareness. Inside the Tribal Council building, she finds a situation developing exactly as she had predicted. Blackwood, accompanied by Meredith Carson in corporate attire that stands out sharply against the more casual dress of tribal officials, has presented what he terms a community partnership opportunity regarding water resource management. Sarah enters quietly, taking a seat at the back of the room as is her custom. Her arrival draws a momentary glance from Blackwood, a professional assessment rather than casual acknowledgement, before he continues his presentation with practiced smoothness. The geological surveys confirm what we suspected, he explains, indicating maps displayed on the council table. The aquifer beneath the northern canyon represents a significant untapped resource that could provide sustainable water access for both the reservation and surrounding communities. Lisa Running. Dear, the tribal attorney, maintains a neutral expression, though Sarah notes the tension in her posture. And Pinnacle's specific interest in this resource would be. Carson steps forward with corporate precision. Pinnacle Resources specializes in sustainable water management for multiple stakeholders. Our proposal would establish a cooperative management framework that respects tribal interests while optimizing resource utilization. The careful language, cooperative management, respects tribal interests, optimizing resource utilization, carries the distinctive markers of corporate approaches to resource acquisition that Sarah has encountered before. The translation is clear to those with experience. Pinnacle wants control of the water, with tribal interests reduced to whatever limited concessions they're willing to grant. Elder Waters responds with the diplomatic caution of experienced leadership. Water is life to our people. It holds spiritual significance beyond resource considerations. Any discussion of management must begin with this understanding. Of course, Blackwood acknowledges, with a respectful nod that doesn't reach his eyes. Cultural considerations are paramount in our approach, which is why our proposal includes significant community investment, educational funding, infrastructure development, employment opportunities. The standard inducements, Sarah notes, promises designed to create community division between those who see immediate benefits and those who recognize long-term sovereignty implications. She remains silent, observing the dynamics of the room, identifying which council members appear receptive and which maintain skepticism. When Blackwood mentions a proposed timeline for decision-making, suggesting an agreement within 2 weeks, Sarah recognizes the tactical pressure. Accelerated timelines prevent thorough legal review and community consultation, forcing decisions based on limited information and immediate concerns rather than long-term consequences. Lisa Running Deer challenges this directly. Water rights determinations typically require months of review, involving multiple agencies and thorough community input. Certainly in normal circumstances, Carson interjects smoothly. However, our current permits for preliminary assessment expire within 30 days. Without an agreement framework, we would need to restart the entire process, delaying potential community benefits by 18 to 24 months. The artificial deadline, likely based on manipulated permit timing, represents another standard tactic that Sarah has witnessed in previous resource disputes. The meeting continues with technical details and legal frameworks that mask the fundamental issue. Pinnacle wants control of water that has sustained the tribe for generations. Throughout the discussion, Sarah notes how Blackwood's attention periodically returns to her, brief professional assessments that suggest his intelligence on her background remains incomplete. He recognizes her as potentially significant, but hasn't yet determined exactly why or how. When the council meeting concludes without immediate decisions, Sarah approaches Lisa Running Deer as tribal members disperse, making the exchange appear as casual conversation between community members. The northern plants are showing unusual patterns this season, she comments, the seeming observation about traditional medicine carrying specific warning about the surveillance discovered that morning. Lisa, having worked with David before his death, recognizes Sarah's operational communication style immediately. Perhaps we should consult about appropriate harvesting approaches, she responds, suggesting a private conversation away from potential monitoring. My cabin at sunset, Sarah confirms with a slight nod. Traditional methods may be most appropriate, given seasonal conditions. Their exchange complete, Sarah turns to find Blackwood directly in her path, his approach so deliberate it can only be intentional. Up close, his physical presence carries the unmistakable quality of someone trained for conflict. Balanced stance, controlled energy, calculated positioning that appears casual while maintaining tactical advantage. Ms. Cloudwalker, he greets, with professional courtesy. Thomas Blackwood, Pinnacle Resources. Your community members speak highly of your traditional knowledge. Mr. Blackwood, Sarah acknowledges with the reserved dignity expected of a traditional healer. Knowledge belongs to the community, not to individuals. I simply help maintain what our ancestors preserved. An admirable perspective. His gaze studies her with professional assessment, barely disguised as casual interest. I understand you've lived on the reservation your entire life. The probe is deliberate, testing her documented background with a detail he likely knows is incorrect. Sarah maintains her composed expression, neither confirming nor challenging the inaccurate information. "My roots here run deep," she responds with careful ambiguity, "though life takes many of us on journeys before we return to where we belong." Something in Blackwood's expression shifts slightly, recognition that she has neither accepted his false premise nor provided corrective information that would reveal her awareness of being investigated. "Journeys shape us profoundly," he agrees, maintaining the superficial conversation while clearly assessing her responses. "Your knowledge of traditional plant medicine is particularly noted. I imagine such expertise requires extensive familiarity with the reservation's northern territories." The specific reference to the northern section confirms Sarah's tactical assessment. Blackwood is probing her connection to the areas most critical to Pinnacle's water interests. His approach suggests he suspects her former ranger role but lacks confirmation. "All medicine requires understanding the land from which it grows," she offers neutrally. "Different plants teach different lessons depending on where they're found." Carson approaches, interrupting their exchange with corporate timing that suggests coordination rather than coincidence. "Mr. Blackwood, we have that conference call, scheduled in 15 minutes. "Of course." He offers Sarah a professional smile that evaluates rather than welcomes. "Perhaps we'll have opportunity for further conversation, Ms. Cloudwalker. I'm particularly interested in traditional perspectives on resource stewardship. Understanding comes through listening to the land before attempting to claim its gifts," Sarah responds, the gentle wisdom of a healer carrying subtle warning that only someone with Blackwood's background would fully recognize. Something in his eyes acknowledges the underlying communication, a momentary professional recognition between opponents who recognize each other's capabilities without yet determining their full measure. As Blackwood and Carson depart, Sarah maintains her unhurried, healer's demeanor while mentally cataloging every detail of the exchange. Blackwood is methodically gathering intelligence on key community members, with particular focus on those with potential influence or capabilities beyond their current roles. His interest in her suggests his background investigation has revealed inconsistencies, but not yet her full history. The afternoon finds Sarah returning to her cabin, maintaining her established routine with practiced consistency. Community members seeking healing consultation arrive at scheduled times, receiving the same attentive care they have come to expect over the past 5 years. Between consultations, Sarah prepares medicines from the plants gathered that morning, her hands working with the precise efficiency that characterizes both her healing practice and her former tactical operations. Each movement serves dual purpose, creating legitimate medicines while positioning equipment and supplies for the security planning session with Lisa scheduled for sunset. To Mrs. Walking Bear, suffering from joint inflammation, Sarah provides a willow bark preparation with careful instructions for application. To young Lily Stands Strong, experiencing her first moontime, she offers traditional guidance along with protective tea blends. To Elder Samuel Nighthorse, whose diabetes requires careful management alongside his conventional medication, she prepares a special blend that helps stabilize blood sugar. Throughout these consultations, Sarah maintains the compassionate presence expected of a traditional healer, while her tactical awareness monitors the surrounding area through peripheral vision and subtle sound assessment. Twice, she notes the black SUV passing her cabin, surveillance disguised as normal movement through the community but revealing specific interest in her activities. As afternoon transitions toward evening, Sarah completes preparation for the coming night's operations. Under the guise of organizing medicines, she positions emergency equipment for quick access. While arranging her healing space for the next day, she establishes clear pathways to exit points and defensive positions to casual observers, including any surveillance Blackwood might have established. She appears to be simply concluding her day's healing work with the methodical care expected of a traditional practitioner. Only someone with specific tactical training would recognize how her movements optimize response capabilities while maintaining perfect cover as ordinary activity. The sun touches the western mountains as Lisa Running Deer approaches the cabin. Her business attire exchanged for casual clothing that wouldn't draw attention during an evening visit between community members. Sarah meets her at the door with a traditional greeting that would appear appropriate to any observers while allowing her to scan the surroundings for surveillance. Inside, with the door secured and evening shadows providing additional privacy, Sarah transitions from healer to tactical advisor with subtle but unmistakable transformation. Her posture shifts from welcoming openness to alert efficiency, her movements becoming more economical, her voice taking on the precise clarity that once characterized Ghost Eyes briefing her ranger team. The northern boundary has been compromised, she states without preamble, unfolding her map on the table. 7 surveillance devices located this morning, covering all major approach routes to the watershed. Lisa studies the marked locations with the focused attention of someone whose legal expertise now requires practical security understanding. They're moving faster than typical corporate encroachment. The proposal today carried unusual urgency. Blackwood isn't typical corporate, Sarah confirms, retrieving additional documents from a hidden compartment beneath her floorboards. Jack Redhorn provided confirmation. He has military special operations background followed by private security, work in disputed territories. His presence suggests Pinnacle anticipates resistance and has prepared accordingly. Together, they assess the situation with complementary expertise. Lisa's legal knowledge identifying vulnerabilities in tribal water rights documentation, Sarah's security background evaluating physical threats and response options. As darkness settles over Eagle Valley, the healer's cabin becomes an operational planning center, with 2 women preparing to defend their community against an adversary whose resources far exceed their own. What Blackwood cannot know, as his surveillance team reports only routine activity at the unassuming cabin on the reservation's edge, is that Ghost Eyes has already begun counter-operations against his intrusion. The traditional healer preparing medicines and receiving a community visitor is simultaneously the legendary tracker planning his downfall. As Sarah Cloudwalker moves through her evening routine with practiced efficiency, the distinction between her public healing skills and disguised protective abilities blurs into a single, integrated purpose: the preservation of her people, their water, and their way of life against those who would claim what is not theirs to take. The next 3 days bring a transformation to Eagle Valley that only someone with Sarah's tactical awareness could fully appreciate. Blackwood's strategy unfolds with professional precision, each component building upon the last to establish Pinnacle's position while undermining tribal resistance. Morning finds the community center's parking area occupied by 2 gleaming trucks, bearing Pinnacle Resource Development logos and loaded with water testing equipment. The corporate presence, explained as preliminary environmental assessment in coordination with tribal officials, establishes legitimate activity that masks more extensive operations beyond reservation boundaries. Sarah observes this development while conducting her usual morning medicine preparation. Through her window, she notes how Blackwood himself directs the unloading with military efficiency, each piece of equipment positioned with purpose rather than convenience, each team member assigned specific tasks that optimize their coverage of community infrastructure. Strategic positioning, she murmurs to herself, recognizing how the equipment creates both physical presence in the community center parking lot, the heart of tribal activities, and justification for Pinnacle personnel to move freely throughout. Key areas of the reservation. The bell above her door chimes as Amanda Littlefeather enters, her normally cheerful expression clouded with concern. "Those Pinnacle people are everywhere this morning," she reports without preamble. "They've set up some kind of water testing station at the community center, and they're asking for volunteer participation in a community water quality survey." Sarah continues grinding herbs with measured precision, though her tactical assessment immediately recognizes the approach. Establishing baseline access to homes throughout the reservation under the guise of water testing would provide comprehensive intelligence on community layout, resources, and potential resistance points. "Did they present proper authorization for testing?" she asks, her tone suggesting mere curiosity rather than security concern. "Lisa Running Deer was reviewing some paperwork with them when I left," Amanda confirms. "They had something with official letterhead from the EPA, but Lisa seemed skeptical about its scope. This detail sharpens Sarah's attention. Environmental Protection Agency documentation would provide legitimate cover for water testing, but likely with specific limitations that Pinnacle would attempt to exceed. Lisa's legal expertise would recognize such boundaries, creating potential friction that would reveal Blackwood's true objectives. The Tribal Council should ensure any testing follows proper protocols, Sarah offers neutrally. "Perhaps you might mention to Elder Waters that traditional blessing of water sources would be appropriate before outside testing begins." The suggestion carries dual purpose, alerting tribal leadership to monitor Pinnacle's activities closely while establishing cultural practices that might delay or limit access to certain areas until Sarah can implement counter-surveillance measures. After Amanda departs, Sarah moves with increased purpose, gathering supplies for what appears to be routine medicine preparation, but actually serves security functions. Into her medicine bag, she places several small pouches containing mixtures that, when placed in water, neutralize certain chemical testing agents without leaving detectable traces. These natural compounds, derived from traditional knowledge, but refined through her ranger training, could prevent Pinnacle from gathering accurate data on water composition that might strengthen their legal claims. By mid-morning, Sarah's surveillance network, composed of tribal youth she has quietly trained in basic observation techniques, reports Pinnacle personnel conducting water sampling at the reservation's main well, the community center's water system, and approach points to the northern watershed. Each sampling team includes technical staff in corporate attire, accompanied by security personnel in casual clothing that fails to disguise their tactical training. More concerning are reports of Pinnacle representatives visiting individual homes, particularly those of tribal elders, offering water quality testing alongside glossy brochures outlining community partnership benefits that emphasize immediate financial incentives. They're offering Elder Nighthorse $5,000 as a community consultant if he signs their support documentation, Michael reports during his midday check-in at Sarah's cabin. Grandfather says 3 other elders received similar offers, each with specific amounts that seem to match their influence in the community. Sarah processes this information with contained concern. The targeted approach, identifying key community members and offering personalized incentives, demonstrates sophisticated intelligence gathering beyond what normal corporate research would provide. Someone has mapped the community's influence networks and decision-making structures with professional precision. "And the tribal police?" she asks, continuing to prepare medicine bundles while maintaining their operational conversation. "Chief Bryant met with Blackwood this morning," Michael reports. Afterward, he told his officers to cooperate fully with Pinnacle's security team during their environmental assessment. This development confirms Sarah's tactical assessment. Blackwood is systematically neutralizing official resistance through a combination of legal documentation, financial incentives, and professional intimidation, disguised as cooperation. The approach follows established patterns she has witnessed in previous resource disputes, though executed with exceptional efficiency. "Michael, I need you to deliver medicine to several homes this afternoon," Sarah directs, handing him a basket containing small pouches of herbs. Each recipient will understand their particular medicine requires specific application. The seemingly routine delivery will actually distribute counter-surveillance instructions to key community members Sarah has identified as trustworthy individuals who can monitor Pinnacle's movements and report through Michael rather than potentially compromised communication channels. As Michael departs on his assignment, Sarah receives another visitor, Lisa Running Deer, arriving under the pretense of discussing traditional medicine, but actually continuing their security coordination. Blackwood's EPA documentation is technically legitimate but deliberately misleading, Lisa reports once they've verified privacy. The authorization permits water quality sampling for regional watershed assessment, but doesn't grant access to our primary water sources or sacred sites. They're operating well beyond the documented scope. Sarah absorbs this confirmation of Pinnacle's approach, using limited legitimate authorization as cover for more extensive operations. "Have you challenged this directly?" "I filed formal objections this morning," Lisa confirms with professional satisfaction, which means they're legally required to restrict activities to specifically authorized locations until clarification is received. The tactical advantage this creates is significant. Blackwood must either comply with restrictions, revealing which water sources are most critical to his objectives by which restrictions he challenges, or continue unauthorized activities, creating documented violations that strengthen potential legal countermeasures. Blackwood won't accept limitations easily, Sarah observes, her assessment based on both his professional background and observed operational style. How did he respond? Lisa's expression confirms this prediction. He was professionally disappointed, suggested that unnecessary legal complications might impact the generosity of Pinnacle's community investment proposals. The veiled threat matches Blackwood's established approach, maintaining corporate civility while applying pressure through implied consequences. What concerns Sarah is the next likely escalation when legal restrictions prove ineffective against his objectives. "We should expect them to continue unauthorized assessment under cover of legitimate activities," she advises, unfolding her map. On the table, they'll focus on these northern approaches to the watershed, likely during early morning or evening when observation is more difficult. Throughout the afternoon, Sarah maintains her healer routine while receiving regular updates from her improvised surveillance network. Pinnacle's teams maintain visible presence in central community areas, conducting authorized testing with conspicuous adherence to protocols. This visible compliance, however, masks more concerning developments on the reservation's periphery. 2. Security vehicles positioned near the Northern Trail access, reports Lily Stan Strong, a 17-year-old who has eagerly embraced her observation assignment. They've established what looks like a monitoring station, disguised as environmental sampling. 4 Pinnacle personnel with survey equipment heading toward Eagle Ridge, adds Jason Whitebear, whose position at the Tribal Maintenance Department provides legitimate reason to observe reservation boundaries. They claim to be checking water runoff patterns, but their equipment includes ground-penetrating radar, not typically used for surface water assessment. Each report confirms Sarah's tactical assessment. Blackwood is conducting comprehensive resource evaluation while establishing security presence throughout the reservation, particularly around access points to the northern watershed. The pattern suggests preparation for operations beyond simple water testing. By late afternoon, Sarah receives the development she has been anticipating since the council meeting. Blackwood's response to the legal restrictions Lisa imposed on Pinnacle's activities. Elder Waters arrives at her cabin, his normally serene expression tightened with concern. Blackwood has requested an emergency tribal council session this evening, he informs her. Pinnacle's corporate headquarters has apparently authorized a significant enhancement to their community partnership proposal that requires immediate consideration. The accelerated timeline represents classic pressure tactics, creating artificial urgency that undermines thoughtful evaluation and community consultation. More concerning is the timing. An evening meeting would limit attendance by working community members and reduce transparency in decision-making. "Will you attend?" Elder Waters asks, the question carrying layers of meaning beyond its surface. Sarah considers her options with tactical precision. Her presence at the council meeting would maintain her established community role while allowing direct observation of Blackwood's approach. However, it would also prevent her from monitoring potential field operations that might occur while tribal leadership is occupied with the meeting. "I believe the traditional medicine perspective should be represented," she confirms, making her decision based on priority assessment. Michael and others can monitor field activities, but only she can fully assess Blackwood's tactical presentation and identify the real threats beneath corporate language. As Elder Waters departs, Sarah makes final preparations with methodical efficiency. She selects clothing appropriate for a council meeting, but designed for operational flexibility. A ribbon skirt that allows full range of movement, comfortable moccasins that would support quick response if needed. A shawl that could serve multiple, tactical purposes beyond its traditional appearance. Into a medicine pouch worn at her waist, she places small tools disguised as ceremonial items. A stone knife with exceptional cutting properties, herbal compounds that could temporarily neutralize, electronic surveillance, natural materials that could create distractions if needed. Nothing that would trigger security concerns if discovered, but collectively providing operational capabilities beyond what anyone would expect from a traditional healer. As evening approaches, Sarah secures her cabin with practiced efficiency, activating security measures disguised as traditional protections. Tobacco and sweetgrass placed at entry points serve both spiritual purposes and as tampering indicators. Particular arrangements of stones near windows would be disturbed by any intrusion, specific patterns of cornmeal that would reveal footprints under ultraviolet light. The walk to the tribal council building takes 7 minutes at an unhurried pace. Sarah uses this time to observe changes throughout the community since Pinnacle's arrival 3 days earlier. The most visible transformation is the increased presence of outsiders, Pinnacle personnel moving through the reservation with professional purpose disguised as corporate enthusiasm. More concerning are the subtle security measures now established throughout central community areas. Cameras disguised as environmental monitoring equipment, motion sensors positioned near key infrastructure, observation points established with clear sightlines to community gathering areas. The comprehensive coverage suggests preparation beyond simple corporate security. The tribal council building stands illuminated against the gathering dusk, its parking area filled with vehicles including 3 black SUVs bearing Pinnacle's corporate logo. Inside, the council chamber has been arranged in corporate presentation style. Rows of chairs facing a projection screen, professional lighting highlighting presentation materials, bottled water bearing Pinnacle labels placed at each seat. Sarah takes a position near the back wall, her chosen location providing optimal observation of both presenters and community members while maintaining clear access to exits. From this vantage point, she notes how Blackwood has positioned his team throughout the room. Carson near the presentation materials, 2 security personnel near primary entrances, technical staff distributed among tribal members, creating an impression of integration while actually establishing control of information flow. Elder Waters opens the session with traditional prayer, his deliberate emphasis on the sacred nature of water within tribal spirituality, establishing cultural context that Pinnacle's presentation must acknowledge. Lisa Running Deer sits beside him, legal documents arranged with professional precision, her expression revealing nothing of their earlier strategic planning. Blackwood himself presents a striking figure as he moves to the front of the room, his expensive, casual attire projecting approachable authority, his physical presence commanding attention without obvious intimidation, his expression conveying reasonable determination rather than corporate aggression. "Thank you for accommodating this expedited session," he begins, his voice carrying that particular quality of controlled charisma that Sarah recognizes from experienced commanders. "Our corporate leadership has authorized me to present an enhanced community partnership framework that addresses concerns raised in our previous discussions. What follows is a masterful presentation combining corporate resources with psychological manipulation, increased financial incentives for the tribal community, accelerated infrastructure development, educational funding targeted to specific needs identified through Pinnacle's community assessment. Each element is precisely calibrated to address community vulnerabilities while advancing Pinnacle's primary objective of controlling the watershed." Sarah observes both the presentation and community reactions with professional assessment. Blackwood's approach demonstrates sophisticated understanding of tribal dynamics, offering benefits that address immediate needs while structuring water rights agreements in complex legal language that obscures long-term implications. More concerning is how his presentation systematically counters specific objections raised by tribal leadership, offering cultural preservation funding to address Elder Waters' spiritual concerns, proposing joint management committees to address sovereignty issues, suggesting independent environmental monitoring to address ecological impacts. The comprehensive response to tribal positions reveals intelligence gathering beyond what 3 days of community presence should provide. Someone has been monitoring tribal discussions, providing Blackwood with detailed understanding of internal deliberations and specific concerns. When Lisa raises questions about legal jurisdiction and specific treaty protections, Blackwood responds with prepared documentation and legal precedents that suggest extensive preparation specifically targeting the tribe's strongest protections. His legal counter-arguments, while presented as collaborative problem-solving, systematically undermine generations of tribal water rights. Throughout the presentation, Sarah notes how Blackwood periodically glances in her direction. Not obvious attention but tactical awareness of her position and reactions. These brief assessments confirm her earlier conclusion. He has identified her as significant, but hasn't determined exactly why or how. The meeting's dynamics shift when Blackwood introduces the centerpiece of Pinnacle's enhanced proposal, a community development fund offering immediate payment of $5 million upon preliminary agreement, with additional payments structured throughout the implementation process. This investment represents Pinnacle's commitment to genuine partnership, he explains, with practiced sincerity. Rather than typical corporate approaches that prioritize shareholder value, we believe in creating shared prosperity through collaborative resource stewardship. The financial offer, extraordinary for a community facing significant economic challenges, creates visible impact throughout the room. Sarah observes tribal members exchanging glances that reveal internal divisions forming, elders maintaining traditional skepticism while younger members calculate potential community benefits from such unprecedented funding. As discussion opens, following Blackwood's presentation, these divisions become increasingly apparent. Voices supporting pragmatic consideration of Pinnacle's offer cite immediate community needs, healthcare infrastructure, educational opportunities, housing improvements, while traditional voices emphasize sovereignty concerns and spiritual relationships with water that transcend financial valuation. Lisa Running Deer maintains professional composure while identifying specific legal concerns with the proposed agreements. Her questions about jurisdiction, environmental impact assessment, and sovereign authority over resource decisions represent a skilled legal challenge to Blackwood's carefully constructed proposal. When Elder Waters calls for community input beyond council members, Sarah weighs her intervention carefully. Speaking would draw Blackwood's attention more directly, potentially accelerating his efforts to identify her background. Remaining silent, however, would surrender valuable opportunity to shape community understanding of what truly threatens them. She rises with deliberate calm, her movement drawing attention without demanding it. "I speak only as one who prepares medicine," she begins, her voice carrying that distinctive quality that draws listeners into focused attention. Our traditional understanding teaches that water is not a resource to be claimed, but a relation to be respected. Blackwood watches her with sharpened interest as she continues, her seemingly traditional perspective carrying subtle warning to those with ears to hear. When powerful interests suddenly discover value in what has sustained us for generations, we might question not only their offers, but their timing and true intentions. Without directly challenging Pinnacle's proposal, she reframes the discussion from financial opportunity to deeper questions of sovereignty and protection. Agreements made in haste often bring generations of regret. Perhaps we might consider not only what is offered today, but what might be taken tomorrow. Her measured intervention achieves multiple objectives, reinforcing traditional perspectives while suggesting caution without specific accusations, maintaining her healer persona while subtly establishing herself as a voice of protective wisdom. Rather than simple traditionalism, Blackwood's expression reveals professional reassessment, recognition that her influence extends beyond traditional medicine into community decision-making. When he responds, his approach combines respectful acknowledgement with subtle dismissal. "Traditional wisdom deserves our deepest respect," he offers with practiced cultural sensitivity, which is why our proposal includes specific protections for ceremonial water use and cultural access. We believe modern resource management can complement traditional relationships rather than replacing them. The exchange, seemingly respectful on both sides, establishes the underlying conflict that will shape coming days. Sarah's protective influence against Blackwood's systematic incursion, traditional sovereignty against corporate acquisition disguised as partnership. As the meeting concludes without immediate decisions, Sarah observes how Blackwood coordinates his team's departure with tactical efficiency disguised as corporate professionalism. Each member has specific responsibilities: collecting materials, engaging selected tribal members in seemingly casual conversation, establishing follow-up meetings with key decision-makers. Most significant is how Carson, the corporate representative, deliberately engages potential supporters identified during the meeting, offering clarification of benefits specific to their expressed interests. The targeted approach confirms Sarah's assessment. Blackwood's team has mapped community dynamics with professional precision and is now exploiting identified divisions. When Lisa approaches her after the meeting, their conversation appears as casual exchange between community members while actually continuing their security coordination. "They're accelerating their timeline," Lisa murmurs, her legal assessment aligning with Sarah's tactical evaluation. The increased financial offer with an abbreviated review period suggests external pressure beyond normal corporate procedures. Sarah nods slightly, her response measured for potential surveillance. Those who hunt with urgency often reveal their true nature before they intend. As community members disperse into the evening darkness, Sarah maintains her unhurried pace, while her tactical awareness catalogues concerning developments throughout the reservation. Pinnacle vehicles positioned near key infrastructure, surveillance equipment expanded beyond water testing locations, security personnel conducting what appear to be perimeter assessments disguised as environmental monitoring. The pattern confirms her prediction. Blackwood is establishing a comprehensive presence throughout the reservation while using the council meeting as distraction. The approach suggests preparation for operations beyond legal acquisition, particularly given the accelerated timeline and expanded security footprint. As Sarah returns to her cabin, she notices a Pinnacle vehicle parked along her route, its occupants maintaining casual observation that fails to disguise tactical positioning. The surveillance confirms Blackwood's continued interest in her activities, likely intensified by her intervention during the council meeting. Inside her cabin, securing the door with practiced efficiency, Sarah acknowledges the reality now confronting Eagle Valley. Blackwood's operation has progressed from assessment to active implementation, establishing both physical presence and community division that threaten tribal sovereignty beyond immediate water rights. The traditional healer who has maintained a peaceful existence for 5 years now faces a direct challenge to everything she has sworn to protect: her community, their resources, their way of life. The question is no longer whether Ghost Eyes must fully return, but how her unique capabilities can counter an adversary whose resources and tactical approach exceed anything the tribal community has previously faced. As night settles over Eagle Valley, Sarah Cloudwalker begins preparations that bridge her dual identities: the healer who understands what must be protected, and the tracker who knows exactly how to hunt those who threaten what is sacred. Midnight finds Sarah Cloudwalker moving through ancient pine forest with fluid grace, each step placed with such precision that not even fallen needles betray her passage. The quarter moon provides minimal illumination, but her eyes, long adapted to darkness, read the landscape as clearly as others might in daylight. This is not the healer known to Eagle Valley residents, but Ghost Eyes fully awakened, the tracker, whose legendary skills once made her name whispered with equal measures of respect and fear across 3 states. Her destination lies 12 miles beyond reservation boundaries, a rock formation known in tribal language as Raven's Nest, where sheer cliffs create natural defense against approach from 3 sides. Here, during her years as head of the tribal rangers, Sarah established one of several emergency caches containing equipment too specialized for reservation storage. The location appears unmolested as she approaches with tactical caution, performing a careful perimeter check before accessing the hidden chamber beneath shifted stones that appear natural to uninformed observers. Inside, protected by both traditional methods and modern waterproofing, lies equipment untouched for 5 years. Specialized communications gear not dependent on cellular networks, surveillance countermeasures designed to detect and neutralize, electronic monitoring, and tactical tools that extend tracking capabilities beyond what traditional methods alone could provide. Sarah selects items with practiced efficiency, taking only what immediate security needs require while leaving the majority intact for potential future operations. The high-frequency communication set with encrypted transmission capabilities will allow secure coordination with Jack Redhorn without Blackwood surveillance detecting their exchange. The electronic countermeasures will identify specific frequencies used by Pinnacle's surveillance equipment, enabling targeted disruption rather than general interference that might alert them to opposition capabilities. Most important is the specialized GPS mapping unit with satellite download capability, allowing her to overlay Pinnacle's activities onto topographical data without accessing internet connections that might be monitored. Combined with her intimate knowledge of the land, this technology will provide comprehensive operational awareness beyond what either traditional tracking or modern surveillance alone could achieve. With equipment secured in a specially designed pack that distributes weight for silent movement, Sarah begins her return journey, using the midnight hours when even Blackwood security teams maintain reduced patrol patterns. Her route deliberately avoids game trails and natural corridors, where surveillance might be concentrated, instead moving across terrain that would challenge even experienced operators. Rock formations requiring technical climbing skills, dense underbrush that would trap anyone without her precise movement techniques, stream crossings that leave no footprints when navigated correctly. Dawn approaches as she nears reservation boundaries, the eastern sky lightening with the first pale suggestion of morning. Sarah transitions from tactical movement to her public persona with practiced discipline, her body language shifting subtly from predator to healer, her awareness remaining acute while her expression softens to the serene composure expected of a traditional medicine woman. At her cabin, she performs a careful security check before entering, noting with professional assessment that someone has conducted surveillance during her absence. The signs would be imperceptible to ordinary observation: a nearly invisible displacement of the cornmeal pattern near her doorway, a specific arrangement of dried sage stems disturbed by millimeters, the faintest compression of soil beneath. Her eastern window. Inside, nothing appears disturbed to casual inspection, though Sarah's trained awareness detects subtle energy shifts, suggesting electronic scanning rather than physical search. Blackwood's team has conducted preliminary intelligence gathering, but hasn't yet committed to an invasive investigation that might alert her to their interest. With practiced efficiency, she conceals the specialized equipment within hiding places, designed specifically for this purpose, compartments beneath floorboards, sealed with materials that block electronic detection, hollowed supports in traditional furniture that appear solid to visual inspection, spaces within her medicine preparation, area that merge technological tools with traditional healing implements in ways that disguise their true purpose. By the time Michael arrives for his morning assignment, Sarah has completed her security measures and resumed her healer routine, preparing medicines with the same careful attention she would on any normal day. Nothing in her demeanor reveals her midnight operation or the tactical preparations now activating throughout her small cabin. "Good morning, Ms. Cloudwalker," he greets, his young face carrying both excitement and concern. "Grandfather asked me to tell you that 4 more elders received visits from Pinnacle representatives yesterday evening after the council meeting." Sarah continues grinding herbs with steady rhythm, though her tactical assessment immediately catalogues this accelerated community engagement. "Were specific offers made?" she asks, her tone casual while her attention sharpens. "Yes, each elder was offered a cultural consultant position with different payment amounts," Michael reports. "And they were asked to sign preliminary statements of support for Pinnacle's water resource partnership." The targeted approach confirms Sarah's operational assessment. Blackwood is systematically building community division by securing individual endorsements that can be leveraged against collective resistance. The strategy is sophisticated but recognizable from previous corporate incursions on tribal lands. "Thank you, Michael. Today I need you to deliver medicine to several homes," she directs, handing him a basket containing small pouches of herbs labeled with recipient names. Each medicine must be delivered with specific instructions for proper use. The seemingly routine assignment actually initiates the first phase of Sarah's defensive strategy. Each medicine pouch contains not only legitimate healing herbs, but also carefully coded instructions for community members she has identified as part of her security network. Some will establish observation points covering Pinnacle's activities. Others will implement communication protocols independent of electronic methods that might be monitored. Still others will begin cataloging specific Pinnacle personnel and their movements throughout the reservation. As Michael departs on his assignment, Sarah activates the communication equipment retrieved during her night operation, establishing encrypted connection with Jack Redhorn while maintaining her medicine. Preparation as visual cover should anyone observe through her windows. Situation accelerating, she reports with operational precision once a secure connection is confirmed. Blackwood implemented a community division strategy while expanding surveillance coverage, enhanced financial offers with an accelerated timeline suggest external pressure beyond standard corporate acquisition. Jack's response comes with the crisp efficiency of their former working relationship. Federal position remains constrained until documentation of specific violations. However, unofficial resources can be made available if the situation warrants. The careful phrasing confirms what Sarah had anticipated. Official intervention remains unlikely, without evidence of criminal activity. But Jack can provide equipment, intelligence, and potentially personnel through unofficial channels if necessary. Primary concern is watershed access, she continues, detailing Pinnacle's focus on the Northern Canyon while monitoring for surveillance. Blackwood's security footprint exceeds normal corporate operations. Team includes a minimum 6 operators, with tactical training plus technical surveillance specialists. Understood. Satellite imagery confirms increased activity at the logging camp base. Additional personnel arrived yesterday, 3 vehicles with equipment consistent with resource. Extraction preparation rather than simple assessment. This intelligence transforms Sarah's tactical evaluation. Blackwood isn't merely securing legal access to water rights, but preparing for physical extraction operations, likely anticipating either completed agreements or sufficient community. Division to proceed, regardless of full tribal approval. Timeline estimate, she asks, the question reflecting their shared operational background. Based on equipment staging and personnel movement, preliminary extraction operations are possible, within 96 hours, regardless of legal status. The accelerated timeline demands immediate response, rather than continued assessment. Sarah's defensive strategy must transition from preparation to implementation before Blackwood establishes operational control of key watershed access points. Resources required for containment, she queries, mentally calculating what her improvised security network can accomplish against Blackwood's professional team. Limited availability without documented threat. 2 specialists possible within 36 hours. Equipment drop at established coordinates tonight. Sarah acknowledges this commitment. 2 operators with appropriate training could significantly enhance her capability, particularly for technical countermeasures against Pinnacle's surveillance infrastructure. The equipment drop will provide additional resources beyond what her emergency cache contained. Confirm Echo Protocol, she concludes, invoking their established code for autonomous operation with minimal external communication. The approach will allow her to implement defensive measures without creating electronic transmissions that might alert Blackwood's surveillance to coordinated resistance. With the communication complete, Sarah returns to her medicine preparation. With renewed purpose, each traditional action now serving dual objectives, maintaining her community healer role while implementing security protocols that will counter Blackwood's operation. The morning progresses with apparent normalcy as community. Members arrive for scheduled healing consultations. Sarah provides traditional medicines and guidance while simultaneously gathering intelligence on Pinnacle's expanding activities throughout the reservation. Those water testers were at my neighbor's house for nearly 2 hours, reports Mrs. Walking. There during her arthritis treatment. asked all kinds of questions about property boundaries and who controls access to the back canyon trails. 3 of their trucks parked near the northern spring all morning, adds Jason Whitebear, who maintains the community water system. They claimed to be taking baseline measurements, but their equipment looked more like drilling survey gear than water testing tools. Each report confirms Sarah's tactical assessment. Blackwood is conducting comprehensive resource evaluation while establishing physical presence throughout key access points to the northern watershed. The pattern suggests preparation for operations independent of legal agreements, likely leveraging community division to neutralize collective resistance. By midday, Sarah has compiled sufficient intelligence to identify Pinnacle's primary objectives and immediate vulnerabilities. Blackwood's operation focuses on securing the northern watershed's mainspring, the source that feeds both reservation water systems and downstream communities. His security measures concentrate on access routes and observation points overlooking this critical resource. The afternoon brings implementation of her counter-strategy disguised as traditional healing activities that raise no suspicion among Pinnacle observers. Sarah prepares for what appears to be a medicine-gathering expedition, packing traditional tools and containers while including specialized equipment concealed within her healer's implements. "I'll be collecting evening medicines near Eagle Ridge," she informs Amanda Littlefeather, who stops by with community updates. If anyone requires urgent healing, Lisa Running Deer knows which preparations to provide. The casual information serves dual purpose, establishing a legitimate reason for her absence while activating the communication protocol she has arranged with Lisa. Should emergency situations develop, Lisa will coordinate the security network, while Sarah implements countermeasures against Pinnacle's surveillance infrastructure. As she departs along forest paths familiar to all community members, Sarah projects the unhurried pace and appreciative awareness expected of a traditional healer connecting with natural medicines. Once beyond observation from central community areas, however, her movement transforms with fluid efficiency, covering ground with silent speed, while maintaining continuous tactical assessment of surroundings. Eagle Ridge provides both a legitimate location for medicine gathering and optimal vantage point for surveying Pinnacle's activities throughout the watershed area. From a concealed position among ancient pines, Sarah utilizes both traditional tracking skills and the specialized equipment retrieved from her emergency cache. The comprehensive assessment confirms her tactical concerns. Pinnacle has established surveillance coverage extending well beyond normal corporate security, with particular concentration on approach routes to the main spring. More concerning are the preliminary extraction preparations now visible at the logging camp base. Heavy equipment positioned for rapid deployment, technical systems established for resource management, security personnel conducting regular patrols, with tactical precision rather than casual observation. With methodical efficiency, Sarah documents each element of Pinnacle's operation, creating detailed mapping that combines electronic data from her specialized equipment with traditional knowledge of the land. The resulting operational picture reveals both Blackwood's exceptional preparation and the specific vulnerabilities in his security coverage. Most significant is his team's apparent unfamiliarity with traditional travel routes known only to tribal members, paths through seemingly impassable terrain that provide access to the watershed without crossing monitored areas. These routes, maintained through generations of traditional knowledge rather than marked on any official map, represent a critical tactical advantage for Sarah's counter-operations. The afternoon progresses as Sarah implements the first phase of active countermeasures, moving with Ghost Eye's legendary stealth between Pinnacle's surveillance positions. At each location, she deploys specialized equipment retrieved from her emergency cache, devices that appear as natural elements of the landscape while actually performing critical security functions. A cluster of stones arranged in seemingly random patterns near a game trail contains electronic countermeasures that will identify and catalogue Pinnacle's communication frequencies. A hollow tree marked with traditional symbols receives monitoring equipment that will alert Sarah's network to personnel movements through key areas. Small containers, disguised as traditional offerings placed near water testing stations, will neutralize certain chemical markers without alerting Pinnacle technicians to interference. Each placement requires Ghost Eye's exceptional fieldcraft, moving within meters of active surveillance equipment without triggering detection, disturbing natural environments enough to place technological tools without leaving signs visible to even trained observers, maintaining comprehensive awareness of security, patrol patterns, while implementing countermeasures in their operational areas. By late afternoon, Sarah has established the foundation for defensive operations throughout the watershed area, an integrated network combining traditional knowledge with modern technology that will provide early warning of Pinnacle's activities while enabling targeted countermeasures against their extraction preparations. As evening approaches, she transitions to the second phase of her strategy, activating community resources without revealing the full extent of her security background. Near the northern boundary of the reservation, she rendezvous with Jason Whitebear, whose position maintaining tribal water systems provides legitimate reason for his presence in restricted areas. "Your grandfather was a tribal ranger before me," Sarah begins, referencing knowledge that connects them through unspoken history. "He understood how to walk the land without being seen." Jason's expression reflects both recognition of her reference and acceptance of the responsibility being offered. "He taught me some of those ways, though he said no one matched Ghost Eyes for moving like the wind itself." The acknowledgement confirms what Sarah had anticipated. Jason's family history includes awareness of her former role, though public discretion has been maintained out of respect for her chosen identity as healer. "The watershed needs watchful protection," she continues, her guidance blending traditional wisdom with tactical direction. "Eyes that see without being seen, ears that hear whispers between trees, feet that leave no trace of their passage." For the next hour, Sarah provides specialized instruction disguised as traditional knowledge sharing, teaching Jason advanced observation techniques, communication methods that won't trigger electronic surveillance, movement patterns that utilize natural cover while maintaining optimal vantage points. "Remember how beaver medicine teaches us," she explains, demonstrating how to establish observation position with minimal disturbance to surroundings. "Work with patient purpose, create what protects the waters, remain mostly unseen while changing the flow of what threatens." Jason absorbs this guidance with the focused attention of someone recognizing both its immediate practical application and its deeper cultural significance. By season's end, he has transformed from maintenance worker to activated security asset, a trained observer who can monitor Pinnacle's watershed activities while appearing to perform routine water system maintenance. Similar training sessions have been arranged throughout the day by Sarah's growing network, Lisa Running Deer instructing selected tribal members in documentation techniques that will create legal evidence of Pinnacle violations, Michael Waters, teaching younger community members secure communication methods using traditional signals, Elder John Waters activating cultural protocols that will restrict access to sacred sites through ceremonial requirements. As darkness settles over Eagle Valley, Sarah's defensive preparations transition from establishment to activation. From a concealed position overlooking the logging camp, she observes Blackwood's evening operational briefing through specialized optics retrieved from her emergency cache. The gathering confirms her tactical assessment. Tomorrow will bring accelerated implementation of Pinnacle's extraction preparation, with particular focus on the main spring feeding the northern watershed. Blackwood's security team has expanded to include additional personnel with visible tactical training, suggesting anticipation of potential resistance beyond legal challenges. Most concerning is the specialized equipment being prepared for deployment. Drilling. Apparatus disguised as environmental assessment tools, water diversion technology concealed within testing equipment, boundary markers matching those used in formal resource claims under state water rights protocols. Sarah documents each element with professional precision, creating comprehensive intelligence that will guide tomorrow's counter-operations. The evidence confirms Blackwood's intent to establish physical control of water resources, regardless of legal status. An approach consistent with Pinnacle's previous operations on tribal lands, but implemented with exceptional efficiency and accelerated timeline. With tactical assessment complete, Sarah initiates the final phase of her day's defensive preparations, retrieving the equipment drop Jack Redhorn has arranged through unofficial channels. Moving with Ghost Eye's legendary stealth, she approaches the predetermined coordinates through terrain that would challenge even experienced operators, her movement combining traditional tracking skills with the tactical efficiency of her ranger. Training. The equipment cache, disguised as natural rock formation, contains resources that significantly expand her operational capabilities. Advanced countermeasures against electronic surveillance, specialized communication equipment independent of monitored networks, and documentation tools that will create legally admissible evidence of Pinnacle's unauthorized activities. Most valuable are the tactical profiles of Blackwood's key personnel, detailed backgrounds revealing specialized training and operational histories that explain their exceptional efficiency. The intelligence confirms Sarah's assessment. Blackwood has assembled a team with capabilities far exceeding normal corporate security, including former military specialists with experience in resource acquisition operations in contested territories. By midnight, Sarah has returned to her cabin, completing the day's defensive preparations while maintaining her cover as traditional healer. To any observer, including Pinnacle's surveillance team that continues monitoring her property, she appears to have conducted routine medicine gathering, followed by normal evening activities. Only she knows that Eagle Valley now contains an activated security network combining traditional knowledge, modern technology, and Ghost Eye's legendary tracking capabilities. As she prepares for brief rest before tomorrow's operations, Sarah acknowledges the transformation now fully underway. The healer who chose peace for 5 years has reactivated the hunter who once protected tribal lands with unmatched effectiveness. Her hands, which spent the day preparing medicines and training community members, now check specialized equipment with the practiced efficiency of Ghost Eyes, returning to her true element. The division between her identities, maintained through 5 years of deliberate separation, has dissolved in response to Blackwood's threat to everything she has sworn to protect. Tomorrow will bring direct confrontation between Pinnacle's resource acquisition operation and the defensive network she has established throughout Eagle Valley. Dawn breaks over Eagle Valley with unusual tension, as if the land itself senses the confrontation approaching between those who would claim its waters and those sworn to protect them. Sarah rises before first light, completing final preparations with the focused efficiency that once made Ghost Eyes legendary among both allies and adversaries. Through her secure communication network, she receives updates from observation posts established throughout the watershed area, Pinnacle security teams establishing an expanded perimeter around the main spring, technical personnel deploying equipment beyond environmental assessment parameters, corporate representatives arriving at the Tribal Council building with legal documents suggesting imminent declaration. Most concerning is Blackwood's own movement, departing. The logging camp base with a 4-vehicle convoy carrying what appears to be extraction equipment disguised as testing apparatus. The approach route indicates the primary target at the Northern Spring, the sacred water source that feeds both reservation systems and downstream communities. Sarah activates full defensive protocols with quiet authority that bridges her dual identities, the healer's composed patience merging with Ghost Eye's tactical precision. Jason, confirm water infrastructure security. Lisa, prepare documentation teams. Michael, activate communication networks throughout community gathering. Points. Each instruction deploys specific countermeasures developed through her security planning. Jason securing physical control of water distribution systems, Lisa positioning legal observers to document Pinnacle violations, Michael establishing communication that will coordinate community response independent of electronic methods Blackwood might monitor. Most critical is her own deployment, moving toward the Northern Spring through traditional routes unknown to outside observers. Sarah advances with Ghost Eye's perfect stealth to establish position before Pinnacle's convoy arrives. Her movement combines both identities in fluid integration, the healer's intimate knowledge of sacred lands merging with the tracker's tactical precision. From a concealed position overlooking the spring, Sarah observes Blackwood's arrival with professional assessment beyond casual observation. His operational implementation reveals sophisticated strategy, security personnel establishing perimeter control disguised as environmental protection, technical teams deploying equipment under cover of testing protocols, corporate representatives maintaining documentation suggesting legal compliance while actually implementing unauthorized extraction preparation. Most revealing is Blackwood's own direction, his commands demonstrating military precision disguised. As corporate management, his attention focusing on specific aspects of spring geography, indicating extraction knowledge beyond environmental assessment. His security positioning reflecting tactical understanding rather than routine protection. Sarah documents each element with specialized equipment concealed within traditional medicine pouches, creating evidence meeting federal standards while establishing comprehensive understanding of Pinnacle's operation. The resulting intelligence confirms her assessment, Blackwood implementing resource control regardless of legal status, anticipating resistance while establishing capability beyond conventional corporate security. As Pinnacle's operation progresses, from establishment to implementation, Sarah activates the first phase of direct countermeasures, signaling Jason to implement technical adjustments that prevent Pinnacle from establishing control of water flow systems without alerting them to interference. The approach maintains tribal protection of critical resources while avoiding confrontation that might escalate beyond current operational parameters. Simultaneously, Lisa's legal team arrives at the spring with tribal council authorization, establishing an official presence that complicates Pinnacle's ability to restrict access, while documenting specific violations of environmental regulations and tribal sovereignty protections. The approach combines legal resistance with physical presence, creating procedural barriers that extend beyond what Blackwood's intelligence had anticipated. Blackwood's response reveals professional adaptation, adjusting operational approach to accommodate tribal presence while maintaining extraction preparation through modified implementation. His communication with security personnel indicates contingency protocols activating, expanded perimeter control, accelerated technical deployment, modified documentation approach. Sarah monitors these adjustments with tactical assessment sharpened through years of protection operations, recognizing patterns that indicate Blackwood's experience beyond corporate security, anticipating escalation points before they develop, identifying vulnerabilities in his adapted approach. that wouldn't be apparent to conventional opposition. The situation reaches a critical juncture when Pinnacle's technical team attempts to install flow control equipment directly at the spring's primary source, technology that would establish physical management capability regardless of legal jurisdiction. This implementation represents direct violation of both tribal sovereignty and federal regulations governing water rights on indigenous lands. Sarah's response demonstrates perfect integration of her identities, moving from observation to intervention. With Ghost Eye's legendary stealth while carrying the cultural authority of a traditional medicine keeper. Her approach combines tactical precision with spiritual presence, appearing among Pinnacle personnel without warning while projecting ceremonial purpose rather than security confrontation. This water carries sacred responsibility beyond resource management, she states with quiet authority that commands attention despite her unassuming approach. Some boundaries cannot be crossed through legal documents or corporate authorization. Blackwood turns with controlled surprise that reveals security training beneath corporate demeanor, professional recognition, identifying potential threat despite unexpected appearance. His assessment visibly recalculates as he studies Sarah, with focused attention beyond casual recognition. Ms. Cloudwalker, he acknowledges with professional courtesy masking tactical evaluation. I wasn't aware you had involvement with water management beyond traditional medicine. All medicine begins with water, she responds, her traditional teaching carrying unmistakable boundary establishment beneath the philosophical surface. Those who understand healing recognize what must remain free from external control. Their exchange establishes mutual recognition beyond previous engagement, Blackwood identifying Sarah as specific opposition rather than general community resistance, Sarah acknowledging his operational capability beyond corporate representation. The confrontation has elevated from institutional positioning to direct engagement between opposing specialists. Our environmental assessment identified contamination concerns requiring technical management. Blackwood explains, with practiced reasoning, that masks operational implementation. Federal protocols authorize necessary remediation, regardless of jurisdictional complications. Interesting that your assessment found problems invisible to those who have protected these waters for countless generations, Sarah observes with the measured evaluation that once characterized Ghost Eyes, analyzing field intelligence. Perhaps your equipment detects only what serves corporate objectives rather than community protection. The challenge represents a perfect counter to Pinnacle's operational premise, questioning technical justification while establishing traditional authority that federal regulations specifically acknowledge in indigenous contexts. Blackwood's expression reveals professional recognition, tactical understanding that his approach faces opposition beyond what intelligence had prepared him to address. Technical assessment operates beyond traditional observation, he counters, with smooth transition that maintains corporate positioning while adjusting tactical approach. Modern environmental protection requires specialized intervention regardless of historical management practices. The exchange continues with dual-layer communication, surface discussion regarding environmental assessment while actually establishing operational boundaries between opposing interests. Throughout this engagement, Sarah notes Blackwood's security, personnel adjusting positions with professional coordination, establishing containment capability while maintaining the appearance of routine protection. Perhaps we might compare your technical findings with traditional knowledge, she suggests, with the perfect balance of cooperation and challenge that creates procedural opening while maintaining protective positioning. Shared understanding serves both modern science and ancient wisdom. Before Blackwood can respond, The confrontation dynamics shift with the arrival of Jack Redhorn, approaching the spring with the unmistakable authority of federal position. His presence transforms the operational environment from corporate implementation versus tribal resistance to potential regulatory intervention with federal enforcement capability. Mr. Blackwood, Jack greets with professional courtesy that masks operational significance. I understand Pinnacle is conducting environmental assessment under preliminary authorization that specifically excludes installation of management equipment without secondary approval. The introduction of federal oversight directly addressing unauthorized implementation creates immediate procedural complication beyond what Blackwood's operational planning had incorporated. His expression reveals professional reassessment, tactical recalculation based on changed circumstances requiring significant adaptation. Our assessment identified immediate contamination risk requiring preventative measures, Blackwood responds, with smooth transition from implementation to justification. Emergency protocols authorize appropriate technical intervention when environmental threats indicate potential downstream impact. Interesting justification. Jack acknowledges with a professional evaluation that carries federal authority. Though documentation requirements for emergency implementation include independent verification through certified testing rather than corporate assessment alone. The procedural counter represents perfect regulatory response, acknowledging potential justification while establishing verification requirements that Pinnacle cannot satisfy for contamination that doesn't actually exist. Blackwood's expression reveals tactical recognition, understanding that his operational approach has encountered opposition beyond conventional resistance. Our technical team has comprehensive documentation, he maintains with professional consistency that preserves operational positioning while adapting to changed circumstances. Corporate headquarters can provide additional certification if procedural requirements demand supplemental verification. The exchange establishes a new operational dynamic. Federal oversight, introducing a regulatory framework that complicates Pinnacle's implementation while creating space for tribal protection measures to activate beyond immediate confrontation. Sarah observes this development with tactical assessment, informed by both her ranger training and traditional understanding of how protection sometimes requires patience rather than direct engagement. While verification protocols proceed, Jack continues with federal authority that establishes clear operational boundaries. Installation activities must cease pending regulatory determination regarding jurisdiction and appropriate intervention. Scope. This official direction creates a procedural requirement that Blackwood cannot dismiss without risking direct violation of federal authority, a boundary significantly more consequential than tribal resistance alone. His response demonstrates professional adaptation, tactical adjustment, preserving future options while acknowledging immediate limitation. Pinnacle will cooperate fully with regulatory review, he confirms with corporate precision that masks operational recalculation. Our equipment remains in its current position pending verification completion, as removal might compromise environmental monitoring during the assessment period. The resolution establishes temporary equilibrium rather than final determination, Pinnacle maintaining presence without continued implementation, federal oversight establishing procedural barriers without complete intervention, tribal protection maintaining access without direct confrontation. Sarah recognizes this pattern from previous resource disputes, positioning rather than resolution, creating operational space for next phase engagement beyond immediate confrontation. As technical teams suspend installation activities under Jack's oversight, Sarah exchanges brief glances with Blackwood that carries professional acknowledgement beyond their public positioning, mutual recognition between experienced operators identifying capable opposition. His expression reveals tactical respect beneath corporate demeanor, acknowledging adversaries whose capabilities exceed what intelligence had prepared him to encounter. The day progresses with systematic documentation of Pinnacle's activities. Throughout the watershed area, Lisa's legal team creating a comprehensive record of unauthorized implementation, Jason maintaining physical control of water infrastructure through his maintenance authority, tribal members establishing ceremonial presence at sacred sites that creates additional protection under federal regulations regarding indigenous cultural practices. Most significant is the activation of Sarah's complete security network, observation posts monitoring all Pinnacle movements throughout reservation lands, communication systems coordinating tribal response, independent of electronic methods Blackwood might intercept, documentation teams creating evidence meeting federal standards for potential intervention beyond current oversight. By evening, the operational environment had transformed from Pinnacle's controlled implementation to dynamic engagement between opposing systems, corporate resources against traditional protection, technical approach against cultural authority, security, capability against Ghost Eye's network, operating throughout territories familiar beyond what outside assessment could possibly understand. The confrontation reaches a decisive phase after sunset. When Sarah's surveillance network detects critical development, Blackwood receiving satellite communication at the logging camp base indicating corporate headquarters authorization for accelerated implementation regardless of procedural complications. The directive suggests Pinnacle intends to proceed with extraction operations despite federal oversight, likely implementing during night hours when observation would be minimal. Sarah activates full defensive response with quiet authority that bridges her identities, Ghost Eye's tactical command merging with the healer's protective responsibility. All observation posts maintain continuous monitoring, documentation. Teams prepare for night operation with specialized equipment. Community gathering at Sacred Spring begins with a traditional water ceremony that establishes cultural protection requiring federal recognition. Each direction implements specific countermeasures against Pinnacle's anticipated night operation. Continuous monitoring, preventing undetected implementation. Documentation creating evidence for federal intervention if violations occur. Ceremonial. Gathering, establishing cultural activity protected under indigenous rights regulations that would make interference federal offense beyond corporate calculation. Most critical is Sarah's own deployment, moving through darkness with Ghost Eyes, legendary capabilities toward a position overlooking Pinnacle's staging area at the logging camp base. Her approach demonstrates skills beyond what even specialized security would anticipate, passing between electronic surveillance points without triggering detection, moving across terrain considered impassable during night conditions, establishing observation without creating disturbance that would alert even trained operators to presence. From this position, Sarah documents Pinnacle's night operation preparations with specialized equipment, recording Blackwood's tactical briefing that confirms intention to implement extraction equipment during darkness, capturing corporate communication, acknowledging procedural violation while authorizing continued operation, establishing evidence that transforms potential federal case from procedural dispute to documented regulatory violation with criminal implications, rather than immediate intervention that might create escalation beyond current operational parameters. Sarah implements a strategic approach, combining both her identities, using Ghost Eye's tactical precision to document Pinnacle's violations while activating the healer's community network to implement prevention through cultural protection rather than direct confrontation. As Pinnacle's convoy departs the logging camp with night operation equipment, they encounter unexpected complications, arriving at the sacred spring to find a full ceremonial gathering underway with tribal members, conducting traditional water blessing that establishes cultural activity protected under federal law. Jack Redhorn's presence alongside tribal members creates additional complication. Federal witness to any interference that would elevate corporate violation beyond regulatory dispute to potential criminal action. Blackwood's tactical assessment is visible even from Sarah's concealed observation position. Professional recognition that the operational environment has transformed beyond workable parameters, requiring fundamental recalculation rather than modified implementation. His communication with corporate headquarters reveals a critical decision point. Proceeding would create documented violations with federal witness present, while withdrawal represents operational failure against primary objective. The resolution comes through corporate rather than tactical determination. Pinnacle headquarters directing operational suspension pending legal clarification that effectively terminates current implementation while preserving corporate positioning for potential future engagement through a different approach. Blackwood's implementation of this directive demonstrates professional discipline despite operational frustration, organizing withdrawal with tactical efficiency that preserves equipment while acknowledging temporary defeat. As Pinnacle's convoy returns to the logging camp base under Sarah's continuous observation, the immediate confrontation resolves into procedural engagement rather than field operation. Corporate lawyers will challenge tribal protection through legal systems, while technical teams develop modified approaches that might circumvent current obstacles. The pattern matches previous resource disputes where initial implementation faced unexpected resistance, creating corporate retreat to institutional approaches rather than continued field operations. The following days bring systematic federal investigation of Pinnacle's activities throughout the watershed area. Jack's official authority now supported by documented violations that justify comprehensive regulatory review. The resulting assessment confirms Sarah's initial intelligence. Pinnacle implemented unauthorized equipment beyond environmental testing parameters. Security operations restricted tribal access to sovereign lands and corporate documentation. Misrepresented actual activities to obtain preliminary authorization. Most significant is the connection federal investigation establishes between Eagle Valley operations and previous Pinnacle activities on indigenous lands, pattern evidence, creating a case for broader regulatory intervention beyond immediate tribal concerns. The resulting federal action extends beyond procedural review to potential criminal investigation of corporate practices targeting tribal resources throughout multiple jurisdictions. 1 week after the confrontation at the Sacred Spring, Pinnacle Resources announces operational reconfiguration that effectively terminates their Eagle Valley presence, equipment withdrawn from the logging camp base, personnel reassigned to other corporate divisions, legal representatives pursuing cooperative resolution that acknowledges tribal authority over watershed resources while preserving corporate positioning. For public relations purposes, the withdrawal represents the complete success of Sarah's integrated strategy, combining Ghost Eye's tactical capabilities with the healer's community network to create protection beyond what either approach alone could have achieved. The outcome preserves tribal control of sacred waters while establishing procedural precedent that strengthens indigenous resource protection beyond immediate circumstances. As Eagle Valley returns to its peaceful routine without Pinnacle's disruptive presence, Sarah tends her medicine garden with renewed purpose that reflects the transformation her dual identities have undergone through this confrontation. No longer maintaining rigid separation between the healer and the tracker, she has integrated these aspects into a cohesive whole, Ghost Eye's protective capabilities serving the same purpose as the healer's medicine knowledge, both aspects, preserving what sustains the community she has chosen as her responsibility. 2 weeks after Pinnacle's departure, Elder Waters visits Sarah's cabin as evening approaches, his dignified presence carrying formal purpose beyond regular healing consultation. After accepting tea with traditional gratitude, he addresses the unspoken transformation now complete in tribal understanding. Our people have always known that medicine and protection flow from the same source, he observes, with the elder's wisdom that acknowledges deeper truth beneath surface appearance. Those who heal understand most clearly what must be defended, while those who defend recognize what requires healing. Sarah receives this teaching with quiet acceptance that honors both its surface meaning and deeper significance regarding her dual identities. Different seasons require different medicines. The land teaches when to gather, when to prepare, when to apply. The Council has formalized what experience has already confirmed, Elder Waters continues, establishing official recognition beyond community understanding. Your role as medicine keeper now includes protecting the knowledge pathways between our people and sacred waters. The designation represents perfect integration of her identities within tribal structure, acknowledging both healing wisdom and protective capability without requiring separation between these aspects of her service to community. Sarah receives this formalization with composed gratitude that honors traditional process while accepting responsibility beyond individual preference. As darkness settles over Eagle Valley, Sarah completes her evening medicine preparation with renewed purpose that bridges her identities without conflict or separation. The healer's hands work with the same precision once applied to tracking operations, while Ghost Eye's awareness maintains protective vigilance through connection with natural rhythms rather than tactical positioning. Through her window, she observes her community with the integrated perspective that makes her unique protection beyond institutional security, understanding vulnerabilities that require healing alongside strengths that provide defense, recognizing connections between spiritual well-being and physical sovereignty, appreciating how traditional knowledge creates resilience beyond what external systems could establish. 5 years ago, tragedy forced separation between her identities, the ranger becoming healer through deliberate disconnection after unbearable loss. Blackwood's threat created reconnection through necessary activation of capabilities she had, set aside, but never lost. The resolution established integration rather than restoration, neither completely Ghost Eyes nor simply Sarah the healer, but a medicine keeper whose protection extends from healing plants to watershed sovereignty through unified purpose. Days turn to weeks, and weeks to months, as life in Eagle Valley finds new equilibrium that carries deeper awareness beneath familiar patterns. Community members who participated in Sarah's security network maintain quiet vigilance disguised as traditional practices. Young people learning tracking skills alongside cultural teachings, elders passing observation techniques through stories that appear purely historical, tribal council establishing formal protection protocols that integrate traditional knowledge with modern legal frameworks. Most significant is the transformation in Sarah herself, no longer hiding aspects of her identity through deliberate separation, but integrating herself in service to community. Her healing practice continues with the same compassionate attention that defined her past 5 years, while her protective capabilities now acknowledge openly through both official designation and community understanding. The gang who had taunted, a native widow, not realizing she was the tribe's best tracker and hunter, had departed Eagle Valley with corporate efficiency that masked tactical defeat. What they left behind was stronger than what they had encountered. A community whose traditional protection had been reawakened through contemporary threat, a security network integrating ancient knowledge with modern capability, and a woman whose healing hands and hunter's heart now served a unified purpose without separation or conflict. Sarah Cloudwalker tends her sacred fire with the same deliberate attention that once maintained Ranger protocols, each movement serving both spiritual connection and protective vigilance, each action honoring both healing tradition and security responsibility. The flames illuminate the face of a woman who embodies integration beyond institutional boundaries, the native widow whose quiet strength combines healer's wisdom and hunter's precision in service to what truly matters: the people, the water, and the sacred bond between them that no corporate document could ever sever. 3 months after Pinnacle's departure, Jack Redhorn visits Sarah's cabin with news that extends beyond Eagle Valley's immediate victory. His arrival carries both official purpose and personal connection, professional responsibility alongside respect for her exceptional capabilities. Federal investigation has expanded to Pinnacle operations across 7 states, he reports as they walk along the edge of her medicine garden. Your documentation created the foundation for a broader case examining systematic targeting of tribal resources through coordinated tactics. Sarah absorbs this information with quiet satisfaction that acknowledges wider protection beyond her immediate community. Water teaches us connections beyond visible streams. What happens in one place affects many others downstream. Corporate headquarters faces criminal investigation for conspiracy against tribal sovereignty, Jack continues, his expression suggesting professional vindication beyond regulatory success. Blackwood has been removed from field operations pending internal review of unauthorized implementation methods. The outcome represents complete success beyond immediate protection, systemic change rather than isolated victory, precedent establishment rather than temporary resistance. Sarah's integrated approach has created ripple effects reaching far beyond Eagle Valley, strengthening indigenous resource protection throughout numerous communities facing similar threats. More importantly, Jack adds with subtle emphasis that suggests personal significance beyond professional outcome, the BIA has established new protection protocols specifically addressing corporate targeting of tribal water resources. Your methods created an operational template being implemented throughout indigenous territories facing similar encroachment. This legacy extends beyond immediate circumstances to sustainable protection, systemic response rather than individual resistance, institutional framework rather than isolated capability. Sarah recognizes the significance with appreciation that bridges her identities. Ghost Eye's tactical innovation serving the healer's long-term protective purpose beyond immediate threat response. The waters teach us strength through flexibility, Elder Waters shares during ceremonial teaching, his wisdom carrying both traditional knowledge and contemporary application. Like the river finding a path around obstacles, our people have always adapted without surrendering what is essential. The teaching resonates with special significance after recent events. Adaptation without capitulation, flexibility without surrender, protection incorporating new methods while maintaining ancient purpose. Sarah receives this wisdom with deepened understanding born from her own journey between identities now integrated rather than separated. After the ceremony concludes, Michael approaches with the combined respect and familiarity their shared experience has created. No longer simply Elder Waters' grandson seeking healing knowledge, he has become a promising protector, incorporating traditional ways with contemporary understanding. Ms. Cloudwalker. He begins with formal acknowledgement that carries genuine Connection beneath conventional address. Grandfather says I should continue learning both medicine and protection ways if you're willing to teach. The request represents a perfect continuation of what recent events have established, training the next generation in an integrated approach rather than separated specialization, preparing future protectors who understand both healing and defense as interconnected responsibilities. Sarah receives this opportunity with recognition of its significance beyond individual teaching. The land teaches those who listen with complete attention, she responds, accepting this responsibility with appropriate acknowledgement of its deeper purpose. Medicine shows us what requires protection, while protection creates space for medicine to flourish. This philosophy captures the transformation her own journey has undergone, from rigid separation between identities to fluid integration serving unified purpose, from compartmentalized capabilities to harmonized expertise addressing community needs through complementary approaches rather than isolated specialization. As Eagle Valley settles into winter preparation, Sarah's cabin becomes a gathering place for both healing consultation and protection training, community members seeking medicine for physical ailments alongside instruction in observation techniques, maintaining vigilance beyond immediate threat. The integrated practice represents sustainable security beyond crisis response, community resilience rather than specialized intervention, shared capability rather than isolated expertise. One evening, as snow begins gentle descent across the valley, Sarah stands at her doorway watching darkness embrace the land with peaceful transition from day to night. Her awareness extends beyond ordinary observation to deeper connection with territory under her protection, sensing natural rhythms, noting wildlife movements, appreciating seasonal changes that carry both challenges and gifts for those who understand their significance. In this moment of quiet reflection, Sarah acknowledges the journey that has brought her to this integration, from royal protection specialist to grieving widow, from isolated healer to reawakened tracker, from separated identities to harmonized purpose-serving community that has become a genuine home rather than temporary refuge. The gang that had taunted a native widow, not realizing she was the tribe's best tracker and hunter, had unintentionally catalyzed transformation extending beyond their limited understanding. Their attempted exploitation had strengthened rather than weakened tribal sovereignty. Their corporate resources had proven insufficient against traditional knowledge enhanced by modern application. Their dismissal of a quiet medicine woman had revealed fatal miscalculation against Ghost Eye's legendary capabilities. As night embraces Eagle Valley in peaceful darkness, Sarah Cloudwalker tends her sacred fire with measured attention that honors both tradition and vigilance. The flames illuminate the face of a woman who embodies protection beyond institutional boundaries. A native widow whose quiet strength combines healer's wisdom and hunter's precision in service to what truly matters: the people, the water, and the sacred connection between them that no corporate document could ever quantify and no outside force could ever break. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.